Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the December 14th, 2022 meeting of the Oregon Early Learning Council. Delighted to have all of you with us who are on the screens and also others off the screens. And we'll ask our council administrator, Remy, to please call the roll.
Good morning, everyone. Pat Allen, the director of the Oregon Health Authority.
Here.
Andrea Bell, the executive director of Oregon Housing and Community Services, I believe is on the way. Angie Blackwell.
Here.
Excellent. Katie Brooks.
I'm here.
Peter Buckley is on the way as well. We'll look forward to seeing him. Alyssa Chatterjee, the Early Learning System Director of the Early Learning Division.
Here, good morning.
Thank you. Ben Cannon, the Executive Director of the Higher Education Coordinating Commission.
Here, good morning.
Welcome. Colt Gill, the Director of the Oregon Department of Education.
Here.
Thank you. Ann Kubish.
Here.
Kali Thorne Ladd, also on the way. George Mendoza.
Morning, everyone. Here.
Good morning. Dr. Peg Miller.
Here.
Sue Miller, Chair.
Here.
And finally, we have Liesl Wendt, the Deputy Director of the Oregon Department of Human Services, either on the way or representative appointed.
And you, Miss Subin.
Oh, excuse me. I am so sorry, Subin. Subin, welcome to the Early Learning Council.
Here, thanks.
Here, thank you, Subin. Forgive me. I'll never make that mistake again. And it looks like we've got a quorum, Sue. Chair
Yes,
Miller.
we certainly have. Thanks. Thank you, Remy. Okay, we're going to dive into this agenda. As you all know from the material that was sent out, we want to start today, especially while we've got agency directors with us, to talk about our status of our plan update, Raise Up Oregon. And I just want to remind everybody that this is not even being called a draft plan. It's really just a compilation of the input that we've received to date. And it really started with our retreat in October, our council retreat, and then has been enhanced, of course, by other agency partner strategic plans. Our early learning hubs, other partners have provided input. But we're really going to be looking at what's there and what's missing, if anything, today. And then staff will incorporate that input, and then we're going to put this on the road, so to speak, and start with a really robust community engagement process around the state. So we've asked our fearless build leader, Carrie, because build is really taking the lead in helping to staff this, because it's obviously multi-sector. So that responsibility can't land on any one agency. So Carrie, if you would take it from here, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you, Sue. I'm very excited to share the current material. We would really love your feedback on it. The feedback can be part of today's discussion. Remy is going to put a link to a Jamboard, which breaks the current materials by section. So if you want to share individual or kind of in the weeds comments, or say what you appreciate and want us to protect as we gather feedback from others, it gives you a place to give both what you appreciate and where you want concerns or potential edits on each section. And we were hoping for that feedback, if you want to give it, by the end of next week, because we'll update the draft. And then one of the conversations that we'll have today is where we'll take that draft to the community engagement process. So we want to make sure that we have time to incorporate any recommended changes or feedback that we've received. So our plan is to have a discussion about what's written, talk to you about what we know about the community engagement to date, and then remind all of ourselves about our timeline that we're trying to work toward. So we really wanted to think about how to incorporate the themes that we heard in the retreat, and that we hope that you see these things incorporated into the current materials. there were several things that you gave guidance on. So one was really want the Raise Up Oregon second edition to address multi-sector strategies and where are 2 or more of the state agencies coming together to do work. You want to reframe the systems goals. So you'll see updated and new language for that. You wanted to elevate the role of the hubs. So you'll see them at the strategy level or the objective level. You wanted to address both access, but also really think about how this plan captures the concept of scaling and how well we're getting programs and services and supports across the state. An emphasis on social emotional development, and of course, the ongoing issues for workforce that we have across the state and across sectors, and proactively address equity and inclusion embedded throughout the plan. So we've started to, there was not a lot of feedback or guidance at the time around the vision. So you can see a lot of the vision is the similar concepts that we had previously about all Oregon's young children experience being a positive start or beginning with the prenatal to age 5 time period, right? So the plan's defining the age that we're addressing, and that we don't want zip code, race, and family income to predict the health, educational, and life outcomes of Oregon's children. So as we continue to hone this draft, if you continue to have feedback on how we kind of express the first sentence or what you really want the vision to state, there's opportunity for us to discuss that. We've changed both based on your feedback, the order of the goals and the phrasing of the goals. So now you see that goal 1 is focused on the system and talking about the system being integrated, scaled, and family-centered. The second goal has primarily at the moment stayed the same, and it's really focused on the context of families, right? Young children live in the context of their families and communities. So really thinking about how are we supporting families to be healthy, stable, and attached. And then the third one is focused on children and the specific needs that this population has because their ages are prenatal to age 5. So you see an updated and new goal phrased as all children are thriving in early childhood and beyond. And then we had a lengthy and conversation about the principles. And so this is our first attempt to really try to phrase the principles that guide the drafting and writing as we move forward in the next 6 to 9 months. So this is really to say to you, and there's on the Jamboard, if you want to give us specific language edits, right? Because the principles will state what is important to all of us. And then we'll probably use the principles that as we're evaluating the draft, does the draft actually embed and incorporate these principles throughout it? So it is important that the principles for how we want to emphasize what's important and should be emphasized in the plan are guided by these. So you can see there's an updated one around equity and inclusion. We really wanted one where we're talking about that we want to address the whole child nested in family and community, and really wanted to kind of explore how, based on your comments previously about how we capture that, it really is a system that treats people with respect. The third equity is focused on the role and connection, a stronger connection in this second edition to be between the state system and community. And so really promoting the role of community and family leadership in decision-making, both in design and implementation, because we know that there's opportunities to improve both. The fourth is around being jointly accountable across the sectors to work together. So this is the spirit of the cross-sector part of the work, and what's that next stage of commitment look like with this second edition. The fifth principle is around this idea of scale and improving access. So as we think about the good work and programming and services that exist in the state, is it getting everywhere that it needs to be? Is it available to all the families who would want it and need it? And then the sixth principle is around high quality and continuous improvement across all of our policies, program, funding, services, and practices. So that kind of commitment to always learning about what's working and not working for who, and how do we improve that over time. So this will be a brief review. You have the documents and that kind of thing, but I wanted to give you kind of the arc of the goals and how the objectives and strategies are sharing it. My plan was not to go strategy by strategy with you this morning so that we have time for discussion, but I do want to just continue to reiterate that we would really appreciate feedback through the Jamboard or the discussion about the phrasing as much as the content and whether the arc of the content of each goal is going in the right direction. So goal 1 is now the system building goal. And so we have 4 objectives in this area. And what you really see the arc of this goal is the first objective is really focusing on multi-agency partnerships. So this is the work that 2 or more state agencies are doing together. And then you can see that the strategies capture right now ideas for what the range is of what would be promoted over the next 5 years. The second objective is focused on the roles of the hub and really thinking about what's the regional system and the state to community part of the system. So this is where you see in the strategies highlighting where you want the early learning hubs work to head.
Carrie?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Sue. What would you think of after each objective, just pausing for a minute and just
Yep.
see if council member, because we've all seen these in our packets.
Yep.
And just see if council members have any additions, subtractions, whatever. Because we won't remember everything by the time we get through the whole
Right.
PowerPoint. So looking at this one,
So actually, Sue and I were talking, and because of the work that we've done with home visiting, to consider adding another objective to or another strategy to the objective number 1 that would include the home visiting, like developing an initial plan for creating a coordinated, equitable home visiting system, and then to implement the plan. So that would be 1.10 or 1.10.
Yep. Thanks, Peg.
yeah. I think that will be reflective of our afternoon conversation. Yeah, thanks, Peg.
To perhaps since I'm new to the council and since this is the objective in which the Higher Education Coordinating Commission is most directly called out, I'll just note our appreciation and support for the strategies that are described here, including the need to advance through higher education solutions to the early childhood workforce issues. You'll hear more next hour about some of what we've worked with ELD on for potential consideration in the upcoming legislative session. So there's a whole lot that could be, I mean, it's sort of striking to see it nested as a bullet within this objective, within this goal.
Right.
Consider all the possible, just how large a body of work that single bullet point on this slide
Right.
workforce solutions could represent, and the way it could be an entire plan in and of itself. So I do look forward to working with the council to further develop our thinking around an approach to workforce through post-secondary education. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. That's exactly why we've wanted you on the council for about a year. Sorry, go ahead, Carrie.
I think are there other reflections on this objective before we go to 2?
I guess this is Anne. I just want to make a point about the one eligibility program because it is so important for kids and families, but there's still growing pains there. And so I think at some point I'd love to have more of a conversation about encouraging to expand it to more programs, but understanding that there's still capacity issues there. And so I just want to call that out for now. We don't have to have that discussion.
Okay, great.
Well, and if I could pile on to Anne's point there, I think it can be easy for us to think of expanding one eligibility as simply a technology thing when it at least as much of that is a business process thing. And those over the last couple of years of implementation have turned out to be, I think, quite a bit bigger than the technology issues, which, are still there as well.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we might ask Lisa for an update on that at a future council meeting. Just so we understand both what Ann and Pat have just suggested.
Real quick for me on that slide is, how do you view the relationship with K1 and 2?
I think it also shows up in the individual child. There's an objective around transitions there, but I think if you have a proposal for us to think about this broader systems issues between.
I didn't see the transition piece, but I think if there is a transition piece, just in those bullets is what I'm getting at, though. I'm
Okay.
looking for that.
Okay, great.
And obviously, I guess I would say if there was a transition piece, it might be back and forth. What do you need from kinders or first grade or second, and what do they need from you? So somewhere in there between some level of alignment might be nice, or at least some level of understanding would be good. There.
Yeah, I wrote down the alignment systems development for it. And then we have, I think, the transition part that's related to children's experiences in goal 3. So we can double check that when we get there.
I think what we're seeing, Carrie, is that we want to make sure kind of the highest level bullet for each of our agency partners is included in objective 1.
Right. And like we'll have to think about how everybody shows up when this is about partnerships. So where people want to show up in their partnerships versus kind of the coordination alignment that we need across the state agency. So it is some things to kind of wrestle with about how that shows up in the plan.
Okay, good point. And George, thanks for your input.
So this is objective 2. This is where we've elevated the hubs in this version and think about their work here. So I'll pause for a minute.
Yeah, I think this is reflective of what the council retreat certainly suggested, is that we need more emphasis on the hub's role. And I'm guessing we'll get some feedback on that in our community engagement.
Right. Objective 3 is about the partnership with business and philanthropic communities and their role in championing and supporting the development of the system. So you see here around how we might think about the role of building supply with public-private partnerships, stimulating innovation and systems building, and then where does it make sense to support and expand services. And then the last objective for goal 1 is around really thinking about the work with tribes and promoting and honoring the sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes, and learning and figuring out what it means of already where is there strong government to government relationships and where can we build on that over the next 5 years.
Carrie, if you go back to objective 3,
Yeah.
we might want to add home visiting call out home visiting, support and expand.
Okay, as another example.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
On objective 4, I recognize what Ben Cannon was saying around you add a bullet point and it represents a whole body of work. And the just food for thought, I'm not necessarily saying this needs to be in here, but something that I think about is when I look at all these bullet points, it's all kind of within the tribes and what they will be working on. And these look great to me. I look forward to other people's feedback on that. But I wonder if there's something outside of the tribes in terms of recognizing and promoting the sovereignty that's on other people outside
Right.
of the tribes. And so I wonder, whether it's professional development and learning or something related to relationship building and trust building and engagement. So I don't have a concrete suggestion there, but that's where my mind went.
Absolutely, Subin. I think that's really important for the development of this section.
I think that's a really interesting reflection too, Subin and Angie. Obviously, as a member of the Tribal Advisory Committee, we've really just started these conversations because I think the intention was that these were on agencies, not the tribe. So I wonder if there's a way to frame this that's
Right.
clear that the onus isn't on the tribes to preserve and promote tribal culture. It's on us to support them in that, and making sure it doesn't read like we're asking the tribes to do this work.
Mhm.
Thank you, Alyssa and Subin. I just wanted to add also that Valeria has sent this draft out to all members of the TAC or OTELA to get feedback. And I don't know if she's received any feedback, but I know that we'll continue to be working as the Tribal Advisory Committee on fleshing this out further. Thank you.
So goal 2 is the one where we're focused on families and the fact that our young children are nested in families and communities. And this section has 6 objectives that we're going to review. So the first one is really thinking about how the families are connected to the broad range of services that meet their needs. So you can see here, we're also trying to think about the design of those services really being culturally and linguistically responsive to all the populations across the state. So this is where you can see the strategies are trying to map out what would be the kind of range that we're talking about.
I just have one comment here about 5.3 here, expand, connect Oregon statewide. I wonder if this is a moment, given the excellent work of Peter and Peg's committee, to also mention about the coordination across systems, in other words, not just Connect Oregon, but all of the home visiting systems, and make sure that we emphasize here that coordination.
Okay, great. Objective 6 is about the connections and access to economic supports. We did recognize that the second strategy, the language is a little unclear, and it's actually related to some specific opportunities around SNAP. So some of the DHS staff are working with us to get us updated language for strategy 2. So I just wanted to share that as well. Objective 7 is related to the access to kind of the broad sense of healthcare. So this is where you see physical, social, emotional, and behavioral health kind of listed here. And then objective 8 is really around the family preservation work that is happening and the strategies around that work.
Carrie, I do have something to say about that one, and I'm just kind of looking to see it may be represented here somewhere. But one of the things that we talked about at the retreat was that communication between those child welfare offices and the early learning programs that serve the children and
Oh,
families.
yes. Mm-hmm.
So,
have that show up more clearly at the strategy level.
right.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Angie. 9 is about the co-location of housing and early care and education.
I just want to thank Mitch from Housing for his input on this one. It was very helpful in spelling out how we're going to combine affordable housing and ECE.
And then objective
Can
10.
we go back to that for a second?
Absolutely, George.
And I'm just thinking back to rural areas again and infrastructure or development. And the reality is that sometimes you do have locations that already have classrooms or already have things that if you partner with them and you provide the resources for renovation or provide the resources to help it to be a licensed place or licensed care center, you can potentially also create centers around that as well. And that's, I'm going to say that's the more traditional model that I see, at least in Eastern Oregon. And there are at times finite resources. So for whether it's the Head Start or the school district to come up with funds to transform the location into a suitable location that can be licensed for childcare, that's an obstacle. And districts have to either find their own funds or they have to work with Head Starts to find grants to do those types of things. But my point is, you got something, but there's a whole nother way that it's happening in Eastern Oregon, at least.
Right.
It really involves school districts typically helping. So
yeah, so for us to really think about as we think about editing, how do we give space for multiple strategies?
yeah,
About
lump them in somehow if you can, or get grants for that if you can, and then they'll transform some of their empty classrooms into spaces as well.
Okay, great. And then objective 10 is around parenting and family education, and home visiting is showing up.
I guess my only comment here is objective 5 and objective 10. I wonder if there needs to be some thinking about which things belong where.
Okay.
Because there's a little bit of overlap in those.
Great. Right, and we had a placeholder for the system building strategies for her to be able to be responsive to today's later conversations.
Right.
Right. Goal 3 is our one that's specific to the supports and services for children that are prenatal to age 5. And so we have this new goal of all children are thriving in early childhood and beyond. And this goal area has 5 objectives. So objective 11 is focused on the physical health of young children. And so this includes actually physical and oral health. And then objective 12.
Carrie, I just want to make a comment once again, thanking Pat and all of your staff for pushing through that Medicaid waiver. I mean, in a way, it takes care of the first orange box, right? I mean,
well, it certainly makes a good down payment.
we aren't there yet, but thank you again for your leadership in that. That's a game changer.
Thank you, and appreciate you recognizing the team. They really went all out to be able to get that continuous enrollment.
Yeah.
Objective 12 is focused on the social emotional health and supports for this age group.
The one thing I would say back to pipeline or pathway is, I know for at least where I work or where I'm at, there's a lack of mental health providers for adults or for kids. So if we're going to increase, we probably need to increase pathways for people to become counselors or mental health therapists, and then capacity for organizations to hire them as well.
Yeah, and I can check for alignment between goal 2 that's focused on families and the social emotional health of adults is kind of where that's showing up, and how we phrase that there with what you've shared here as well as we think about both, and the kind of synergy between the both sections.
And that goes back to where, like, for Ben or for higher education, you know, supporting or helping with the pathway creation or the fee remissions or anything that it would take to make it easier for a person to become a mental health provider or a school psychologist or a counselor, whatever it might be.
I appreciate that, George, and noted, and we'll put it on the Jamboard, the inclusion and partnership with Tech on this particular objective.
Just a wording thing, I think, when we talk about trauma-informed care, we also want to include resilience.
Okay, great. Because we have it show up in several places, so I can look for consistency across that peg.
Yeah.
And we might want to ask Ben if we can add HEC to 12.3, because I think mental health supports is going to include workforce.
Yeah, absolutely.
This seems like a sub bullet to 12.2, but there's one of the distinct challenges that, TPP that we face as teacher educators with early care and education settings is oftentimes, because of the way things are framed, educators separate or make a distinction between social and emotional interactions with children and the instruction, and they don't integrate or kind of see those things as a holistic practice. And so I'm not suggesting a change to that, but I do want to call that out as important to address.
Right, because if we have a principle of whole child, in a way, how does that show up in our language about the plan? And this might be a place where, as we think about the framing and the phrasing, we can think about that further, Subin. Objective 13 is about specifically our inclusion and special education support. So this is around supporting young children with developmental delays and disabilities. So you see that the strategies are related to early intervention and early childhood special education.
Again, this might be a sub-bullet of 13.3, but when we talk about workforce, I think it's important to kind of clarify what we mean by the workforce. So there's what early interventionists might need to know or do, or early childhood special education folks. And then there's practitioners in the classroom, professionals in the classroom, I think the other part of this, as George was kind of calling out earlier, is this idea of not just transition, but alignment. This is an issue in terms of early intervention, early childhood special ed, and then special education. Any of the, in our mixed delivery system, as school districts are trying to implement preschool, within preschool to K, they'll have two different systems interacting with each other, and they don't always harmonize. Okay. They're not always in the same key. And so, yeah, just want to call that out.
Great, thank you. Objective 14 is about the delivery of early care and education services. So this is about our preschool and childcare programs.
Hi, Carrie. I have a comment about this. I think the first strategy there is about expanding the supply, which we know is about workforce and facilities. But I think that we need to address and identify as an issue preserving the federal resources that we have right now for slots. So I'm very concerned about coordinated enrollment and under enrollment in Head Start programs. And that is an issue. We don't want to lose the federal slots either.
Right.
So we need that needs to be highlighted in here somewhere. So I don't know if it's another strategy or if it's a different objective, but we need to address that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Angie.
While all of this is going on, this might be a deeper conversation, so I apologize. How are we making it easy for people to want to be childcare providers as well?
As part of the supply building
The
strategy.
complaint I get from childcare people or even childcare providers is like, it is hard to want to do this with all the layers of rules that we have. So my point is, as we're making it really great and robust and high quality, somehow licensing or the way to be licensed shouldn't be, I don't know, as complicated as I think people are feeling. So I know we want the world to get a little more easy or simple, and how do we keep doing that as well? And still have safety and still have learning and still have quality instruction, you know, all of that. But that's more of a philosophy type thought.
Yeah, and George, it's a conversation you and I've had, and I think it's a point well taken. I hear that issue from many people. I think 14.3 is at least putting the licensing issue on the table. And so maybe we want to play with the wording of that a little bit, Carrie.
Okay.
But it definitely is something that comes up frequently.
Yeah, maybe it's even supporting them to be licensed. Maybe it's even coaches or system support folks that help them in a way to get things done. Whatever it might be, that's like, this is less, it's not, even if it's more work, but they're feeling like, there's somebody there for me that can help me get this done or can walk me through this, like things like that. Or we'll do this together. We'll make sure that we support you with anything that has to happen with this technical report or this technical thing. Who knows? But
got it.
Objective 15 is related to the early care and education workforce.
I would just suggest that HEC is can be a partner, particularly around number 2 here.
Great, thanks, Ben.
So I would like to play the role of Captain Obvious for just a moment and just say, you guys.
Since you were literally identified at the Oregon Business Summit on Monday, Katie, you've got free reign here.
Yeah. Well, the Captain Obvious is, this is all great. I really have serious doubts we're going to fix this labor shortage issue because there's just no money in childcare and in health care for mental, some of the other discussions that I've been listening in on, and I don't have the solution. It's just, I know we want to fairly compensate these folks, but I think they're in large part a block for more folks entering into this field is knowing they can't live off of this. And what gets perpetuated here is that childcare doesn't pencil out. The economics of it, it doesn't work to pay people what they're actually worth, not even approaching what a teacher would earn, which is what I think childcare providers should be earning, because in fact, that's what they are. And I think until we figure out how to crack that from several different angles, and I'm not saying it's the state that fixes all this, it's going to be a multi-point effort, but that compensation piece, that keeps me up at night. And that is involved with conversations with everybody I talk to about this, that yes, we need the workforce, and that's the hot topic right now, like everywhere, but how do you actually make the money work? How do you make the economic model work so people are making a good living and you can still keep the doors open?
I want to build on what Katie's saying, that that's absolutely what I'm witnessing and observing as well. For some folks, you know, some people that we see as talented and trying to guide them to the profession, the compensation question can sometimes be a barrier to going further. I think that's also related to, I think, what a lot of higher education institutions have talked about in terms of their early childhood programs is, you know, what happens as a career on the other side of the, you know, them receiving a degree or a license or something like that. And so and I wanted to say that things like Preschool Promise, Preschool for All in Multnomah County, those were game changers for a bunch of folks that were in the field and saying, oh my gosh, I can make more. I'm not saying it's enough. I'm not saying that, you know, we need to stop there and just hang our hat on that. We need to be doing more. But as Katie was mentioning, like kind of going at it from multiple angles and seeing multiple ways to provide that compensation, that might be something that we could do.
Thanks, Katie and Subin.
Hi, this is Angie. I'd like to add a few things to this conversation as well. It's not even just about compensation. It's also about burnout. The job is hard. And although I fully support and agree with the, you know, banning expulsion and suspension, it is a hard job. And if we don't have enough support from early intervention, early childhood special education, and we don't have qualified people in the classrooms, then people are leaving the field. It was getting bad before the pandemic, but now it's even harder. So it's a really hard job. And so if you got a really hard job and not great compensation, people aren't going to join and they're not going to stay. Mm-hmm. Then I also wanted to say something about training. We don't just need pathways. We need pathways that are sustainable for people that are working full time, and the ability to go to school and earn credentials while they're working. And it's not, I don't know how to finish that statement.
No, I understand that you don't want the plan to make an assumption that people go to school and then they work. Like,
correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
But to me, what I'm hearing on that is, like, I'll just say it for my experience in LeGrand, we have a pathway program for students to become teachers while juniors or seniors in high school. And then we also have a pathway program for parapros to be able to become teachers as well. And they work, I will say that they work in our school district, and then there's courses or classes that take place after school. And I don't know if that's what you're getting at, Angie, but that's how we at least do it with our paraprofessionals that wind up wanting to go into that. But the big thing that happens that EOU does, and I think that's where Ben can maybe help out, is they have fee remissions for people. Like, they have fee remissions for high school students that want to become teachers. They have fee remissions for our classified staff, our parapros that want to be teachers. And then that makes them a little bit more motivated to go to school or to take those courses and to go that pathway, because it's like a scholarship to them. And it might not be that they all wind up being teachers, but it does make them a little bit more motivated to go towards that path. And that's something I don't necessarily see there right there is fee remissions or other types of things that would feel like scholarships. But that's something that I think would be nice to further incentivize potential educators.
I'm so happy you brought that up, George. It's nice. I've known that there are kind of homegrown solutions within Oregon around that idea of getting people to their degrees, and things like fee remissions, and Eastern Oregon working in tight relationship with the community. I also know there are national examples outside of Oregon where people have figured things out. Like I think of specifically New Jersey and what they did with their preschool system, and higher education institutions were not only reformatting what they were thinking about in terms of admissions and enrollment, but they were reconfiguring their syllabi, their coursework, and how professors were even interacting with people. So professors were going out into the field and meeting people where they were. I mean, that's probably a really kind of out there solution, but I think those are the kinds of ideas that I think we need to be thinking about in that, 15.2 there. And then to Angie's point around, training and, burnout and how those two things are related, I'll tell you from a practice point of view, when Teaching Preschool Partners is working with teachers, when teachers kind of turn that curve, the first 2, maybe 3 years for a teacher is survival mode, right? They're just trying to get through the day so that it feels like they're that they feel competent, that they feel good about their work. Even with a ton of training, it's still a hard job. But once they feel like they have a good kind of classroom management style or a good approach to their instruction and things like that, the job becomes more nourishing. It becomes something that the deterrent to the job isn't just about compensation, to Angie's point. It can be around always being in that survival state can just be too hard on a person.
Okay, Council, we need to keep moving as we are about out of time.
And this is our last objective. And so, George, this is where transition showed up. So as we think about your earlier comments on where the connection between the systems, between early care and education and K-12 should show up earlier in goal 1, and then how is this taking shape as well?
Okay, I'll be brief, I promise. I think of 16.2, and this is the area where I think I'm spending the most time, out in the field, is I look at the CCR and Rs, I look at LC, I look at, all of this activity around professional learning. And I know this area in particular, the alignment or the integration between K2 and, 0 to 5, that's a distinct challenge, but I don't think that's the only challenge that they're facing right now. And so I don't know if the language needs to be expanded to kind of include all the areas that the CCR and Rs, the LC folks are kind of dealing with, but I'm sure we'll hear that in the feedback when we do community engagement.
So in the interest of time, Sue, do you want me to quickly touch base on the community engagement strategy?
Sure. Yeah, I think all council members can help with this. Because of conflicts, agency directors, several have had to jump off.
Okay.
But yeah, let's do this real quickly.
Okay, so right now there's 2 primary strategies. All the early learning hubs are holding regional engagement of families and of kind of the broad early childhood professionals. They're each prioritizing sectors, so we're working with them on making sure we have coverage of multiple ways that we want to think about our demographics and the communities to give input. But we also wanted to provide, and they'll probably be doing that work in February and March of the actual taking things out. So that's why we can take your remarks today or what you provide over the next week to update the draft before it goes out to the communities. But we also thought that there should be a broad way for anyone to give input. And so we are planning on providing the next draft to be in multiple languages available on the Early Learning Council website. We would like to work with all or most of you about how do we do a video introducing the plan. We have some experience of doing that where maybe people, it's easier for them to listen than it is for them to read, or maybe they want the introduction of the video and then they'll go back and read the plan, and then we'll give them a mechanism for them to give us feedback. So we'll be working with Sue and all of you about how to set that up and how to schedule it and how to be very supportive of you. But if you're interested in that, we really think that will be an additional way. We just had a conversation with the Raise Up Oregon Agency Implementation Team on Friday, and some of them have started to identify some opportunities. So for example, the Oregon Health Authority folks have reached out about an opportunity with the CCOs. Some want to connect with some hubs that might be doing some work with that's connected to professionals in their sector. So I'm sure I'll come back to you to say what other things have developed in the meantime, but wanted to let you know about these two primary strategies. And I think I'll end there, Sue, because we've shared the timeline with folks before, and it's in their materials. So there's no big announcement or changes around that at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Nice job running us through that. And council, thanks for your input. Yes, we will be talking about the plan, obviously, at all of our upcoming council meetings next year. And we know that we're hoping to adopt the plan, in June, July, but there's no hard stop there. So if we need more time for more input from families and communities, we can take more time. Just know there's some flexibility there. All right, we are just about at 11 o'clock. Any final comments from anybody before we get to our advocacy panel? If not, I want
to express thanks to Carrie and Bill for pulling all of that together, because there were a lot of disparate conversations we had in our October meeting, and you masterfully organized them and made it sound coherent.
Yeah, not an easy task. I second your thanks, and I want to thank Ben and Colt for your input and partnership in all of this. It's going to be a busy year ahead. So thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for being with us this morning. You are welcome to stay on for the advocacy panel, and I also know you just may have other obligations.
Thank you, Sue. To take off, but really excited to be part of the council and look forward to continuing the work together. Thanks, Sue.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Thank you, Colt. So council, we are going to move to our advocacy panel, and I see that some members or invitees have shown up. As you know, council, we decided that we'd love to start building relationships with some of the many advocates who are out there working on the behalf of young children and families across the state. So what we did at your request is I sent an email to our 6 agency director partners and asked for a recommendation of whom they work with, obviously not on their internal staff, but externally, who are effective advocates for the work that they're doing around early learning. And those are the people that we're going to be hearing from. The way we're going to run this, we have 60 minutes and we have 6 advocates who are going to join us. So obviously doing the math, that's 10 minutes a piece. I'm sure any one of them could take the entire 60 minutes, but we're going to hold it to 10 minutes a piece. So we've asked each of our presenters if they would spend the first maybe 5 minutes talking about what their projects are, their proposals, really focusing on Governor-elect Kotek, her agenda, as well as the legislative agenda for 2023, knowing we have a very reconstituted legislature as well as a new governor. So that's sort of we're hoping each one will present their priorities for 2023 in the first 5 minutes, and then we're going to engage in conversation with them for 5 minutes. So it'll be really bouncing back and forth. But I think that'll be the best way to make sure we have a chance to have a conversation with our panelists. And we listed them on the agenda, as you could probably guess, alphabetically. So that is how we're going to proceed. And I see that Anthony is on from Latino Network, long time supporter and partner in this work. So Anthony, if you would introduce yourself, and then we would love to hear from you and hear your priorities. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. Appreciate you taking time to join us.
Of course, and thank you to the Early Learning Council and you, Chair Sue Miller. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about not only Latino Network and the work that we do in the community, but also share some of the issues that are top of mind for us as we continue to be a close partner with the Early Learning Division, the state, and our leaders who are really thinking about our children and our family members in the community. First, I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about Latino Network, who we are and where we work, how we work. So Latino Network was founded in the 1990s. Recently, we're celebrated over 20 years of work in the community, primarily work in the Portland Metro, so Washington County, Multnomah County, and Clackamas County. We are primarily focused on work in education, though we work on a broad spectrum of issues, from housing to health, to early childhood education, to diversion programs for young people who've committed their first offense. So our programming is pretty expansive, and we work with around 10 to 15,000 households per year. Here, I apologize. I'm going to move a little bit away from my my heater. I just turned on, and I'm sitting right next to it. So hopefully that's not causing any interference. Okay. So this legislative session, Latino Network is continuing to advocate for investments in culturally and linguistically responsive early learning care, early learning and care in the early childhood space, and this includes investments in the early childhood equity fund, which continues to provide support for children and families, specifically non-English speaking households. In Multnomah County alone, there are around 60,000 Latino households in East County, and we work with a cohort through 3 separate programs actually in the early childhood space. We work with about 300 households per cohort with support from the state. And so these programs continue to be incredibly important for children and also non-English speaking parents who are beginning to navigate those early years of education. So really integrating families into the education system, ensuring that students are meeting their benchmarks in terms of the testing. We know that Latino students and generally BIPOC children are lagging in terms of testing and early childhood literacy. So this is really an intervention that supports that need in the community, and just ensuring that our young children are set up for a successful journey of education as they move through the education system here in Oregon. And so the second priority is also related to early childcare and education, and that's creating pathways for parents and traditional, non-traditional students to gain the skills necessary to provide early learning and care for children in the counties that we serve. Latino Network actually worked this past year through a pilot program to secure a grant to allow some of our employees to gain that necessary education to gain licensures in early learning. So we know that there's a major shortage and recruitment effort underway to increase the supply of educators in the early childhood space. So this is just another thing that we have access to folks who may not be may not have the time to go through the traditional educational pathways. So this is just another strategy to really boost that supply. So those are two of the big issues that we're looking at in terms of this next session. And again, also the last one, I said two, but I have one third one, and that's the Plaza Esperanza investment in East County. So that's something that's been in the works for a few years. It's going to be a $4 million request to close that funding gap. I believe that that we're about 75% to our fundraising goal. With recent inflation and the increasing cost of construction, that our benchmark moved from our initial estimates, but this would essentially allow us to begin that construction process in early spring of next year. So late March, early April.
Awesome. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about that project. What's going to be included in it?
Yeah, so this is, so currently, and just for a little bit more context, so Latino Network has offices in 3 different counties. Recently opened up another office, I believe, in Oregon City. And so we've never really had a flagship building or an HQ. Latino Network has floated from different parts of the city to other parts, renting smaller office space, and this is really the major community center that was envisioned for East County, in Multnomah County, I should say. And so this is one of the highest concentrations of the Latino population in the county as well. So within just a few miles, we've already estimated the amount of children that live in that area. And this is also building on the success of Preschool for All, which we envision having a few classrooms that will provide preschool as well as before and after care for those households that need that additional support. And it would also support the other programming that we have. So drop-in tutoring, working with entire households. So siblings who have younger siblings that they're looking after can have really this space to where students can go after school or before school.
Wow, how exciting.
Yeah, and I really encourage you to look at our website. We have the building rendered and some of those images and really the concepts that we're really hoping for with the construction of that building.
Awesome. Great. Other questions or comments from other council members? Okay, well, we will be delighted to, we're obviously aligned in those priorities.
Chair
Anthony.
Miller?
Yes.
It looks like Subin raised his hand.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Welcome, Anthony. Thank you for sharing your work. Very excited about the things that you're doing. On that second strategy, the strategy that you shared around workforce development, do you find that that's mostly about classroom practitioners, or are you also working on leadership, administration, maybe even entrepreneurship, people who might want to open centers? What kinds of professional development is going on there?
Yeah, the short answer is all of the above. There's I think there's a lot of there's been a lot of education and support around the early childhood investments, and You know, before we had launched this last program, so the program was called Grow Your Own through a partnership with the Multnomah ESD. And so we didn't really realize the amount of interest that there is in the community for these sort of roles. And so the competitive advantage of Latino Network is that we work directly with communities. So we've had clients who, you know, realize that they can have some of these jobs, so they can train for these jobs, and so we take the time and support them through that process. So the program that I'm talking about, the Grow Your Own program, we recruited about 10 folks from our early childhood division, and before they were just home visitors. So they're CEW, so community education workers, who would go to households, not only work with the families in terms of integrating students into the education system, but also working with families to ensure that children have the medical attention that they need, and as well as the access to the medical insurance. So helping families navigate through those programs. And so these are the folks who are there working directly with community, and through this program, they're now gaining teaching licensures so that they can be now a teacher and move through their career pathway in a way that they feel is productive for themselves and their family, while also supporting the community.
Very exciting. It's a great vision to have, Anthony.
Yes.
So thank you very much. And we will jump on your website and look at your new project in East County.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you today.
Thank you. Have a great day. Next, we'll hear from Beth Englander. And Liesl has suggested that Beth join us. So welcome, Beth. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the council. My name is Beth Englander, and I'm an attorney with the Oregon Law Center. And for anyone who's not familiar with the Oregon Law Center, we are a statewide nonprofit legal services provider. So we represent low-income clients through the state of Oregon on civil legal matters, usually related to poverty. And we also work extensively with our sister organization is Legal Aid Services of Oregon. So I regularly work with lawyers from both programs throughout the state of Oregon. So my focus at the Oregon Law Center is on public benefits and our client population's access to public benefits. I thought I would share some of So I'm sorry, my focus is public benefits, and that's why I work a lot with the Oregon DHS and the Oregon Health Authority, but our organization does much more than that. So we also have housing specialists and family law specialists and employment law specialists. So we have a wide breadth of topics that we care about, basically anything that's impacting low-income families' lives. And so I'm going to give you our organization's priorities that are maybe bigger than just the focus on public benefits and safety net benefits. But also I want to talk a little bit about our priorities sort of short term in this next session, but talk also a little bit about some long-term priorities that are important to us that I think may be important to you as well. So in the short term, we are prioritizing the Stable Homes for Oregon Families legislative effort, and this is not going to be news to anyone on this Zoom call, but just we are trying to remember to say it when we talk about Stable Homes for Oregon Families, that the presence of a child in a home is the single biggest risk factor for eviction right now. And just it's no secret how incredibly destabilizing for kids in every way, health, education, safety, when families are forced out of their homes. So that's a really big priority for us. And related to that are the efforts right now to create programs or fund programs that provide just simple rent assistance to families. Just the situation throughout Oregon with how high rent is and the shortage of available units at all, but especially affordable units, is it really is it's a crisis for families. And also already on your radar, I know, is the Oregon Kids Credit, the child tax credit proposal. And again, just like the data is very clear that providing some financial stability to families, especially families with kids, it makes a difference across every metric that's measured. So just, looking for any ways we can support those efforts. In addition, so maybe more focused on the human services side of things, the Food for All campaign, which is looking to expand the basically food SNAP, formerly known as food stamps benefit, making sure that that's some similar level of benefit for increased families' ability to buy food is available irrespective of people's immigration status, because right now there are entire families that are just cut out of getting the food assistance that would make basic health, nutrition, and survival a safer bet for those families. So that's a really important campaign that we're supporting. Beyond just food, I will say that I think maybe the reason that Liesl suggested that I come and talk to this group is one of our goals. So the Oregon Law Center, we work with people, low-income folks throughout the state of Oregon, no matter what their immigration status is. And we also have some dedicated units that are specifically helping farm workers, ag workers, migrant and seasonal farm workers. And so one of our organizational goals is to look at the safety net benefits. No one thinks that they're enough, but we do have good safety net benefits, or at least decent safety net benefits. And we are lucky to live in a state where the folks in leadership at the Department of Human Services and the folks in leadership at the Health Authority, they want people to be healthy and safe and stable, which is just so, I appreciate that on a daily basis. But really, I feel like it's important for all of us to look at all of those safety net benefits and see who is not getting them and why they aren't getting them. Sometimes people don't qualify for them, and that's a hard thing to get around, especially when there are federal rules that cut them out of the programs. Other times they do qualify, but they are afraid or face language access barriers or have fears about their immigration status being impacted, and or the programs just aren't widely used in their particular communities. And so they just don't know about them. And so we are focused on really paying attention, trying to get data on who is getting these benefits, and what barriers are there to all families getting those, accessing the safety net, and what can we do to reduce those barriers. ERDC is a great example. I know you all are champions of ERDC, and the expansions to that program are just so impressive, and I love them. But there are some barriers to immigrant families who qualify for that benefit to getting them. And sometimes there's questions about the language that we use in rules. For example, the word you have to be a resident of Oregon. For a lot of Spanish-speaking families, the word resident implies a legal status, implies that you have a green card. And there's also, the definition of who's a resident, someone who intends to stay, has proved to be a barrier for migrant and seasonal farm workers who do qualify, but people aren't sure they do because they might be moving. They intend to stay through the pear season, but we don't know. They don't necessarily know where the next season for harvesting will take them. So those are examples of things that we're paying attention to, and we would love for you all to pay attention to as well. I did just want to I think highlight, we are looking to support the amazing work by the Oregon Health Authority in getting the continuous enrollment for kids in the Oregon Health Plan, and just making that work in addition to the cover all kids success, like making sure that all kids in Oregon at this point who are low income know, families know that their kids can have health insurance and they can get it safely without fear of repercussions for their immigration status, and just looking to help in whatever ways we can make the continuous enrollment successful. I'll switch now to talk about a long-term priority and focus for us that I would love to present to you to think about. I know this is important to you as well. There isn't like a current legislative proposal around this, but there have been some policy changes recently regarding blood lead testing for low-income children. And it's I'm sure you all are more expert than I am in in a deep understanding of how blood lead levels during the brain development years can be just have devastating negative impacts, and how because a lot of lead poisoning comes there's connections between living in poverty and having increased exposure to lead. It's not like a guarantee that you will, and not being low income doesn't guarantee that you won't have your kids won't have elevated blood lead levels, but the data is clear that it's a higher risk for low income communities. In the last 4 years, 3.5 years, the Oregon Health Authority has changed the rules for Oregon Health Plan to match the federal Medicaid rules to require blood lead testing for kids who are on the Oregon Health Plan, which is really important. And because of the pandemic and people just not going to the doctor as much, and problems with how data is collected right now, we don't know how well that policy change has, how much impact it's had on the ground. But this issue is a long-term priority for us because of, this is like the ultimate upstream, am I saying this right? It's an upstream issue in terms of important for kids and families and child development. So right now, I think it behooves all of us to be asking for that data on how many kids are being tested, where are elevated blood levels being found, are there hotspots in Oregon, and then building on that information as we gather it. The next steps will be really important priorities to talk about what do we need to do to remediate the situation. And those remediation efforts will probably require some legislative action or some funding, and it may be helping remediate in the housing stock. It may be addressing air pollution. It might be water pipes. But those are down the road. But we can't even get to those important next steps until we focus on let's make sure the kids are actually getting tested. Make sure there aren't testing deserts where for one reason or another kids just aren't getting tested, so we don't know where the problems are, and then know what we need to focus on going forward. I feel like I may have taken more time than I was supposed to, so I'm going to stop talking now, but thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Beth. We really appreciate your input. You are certainly focused on the families who are usually left out of priorities and conversations. So we are totally aligned with the focus of your work. And we do need to move on to our next presenter, but I want to thank you very much for outlining your priorities. And they certainly align, I know, with where the council is hoping things go in 2023. So thank you. You're a great resource person. We'll be in touch. Okay, Council, we need to move on, and now would like to welcome Kimberly and Andrea Bell recommended Kimberly for some housing concepts. Am I seeing Kimberly? I'm not seeing her on my screen. So Remy, perhaps you can be trying to connect with her while we move on to Mary Louise McClintock, who is, yeah, obviously we all know her with OCF as a hat on, but today she's wearing a little bit different hat from HEC, and Ben Cannon suggested Mary Louise join us. So welcome, Mary Louise. Good to see you again.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to see you all. I'm Mary Louise McClintock. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Education Strategy and Policy Advisor at Oregon Community Foundation. OCF is a foundation. We are not an advocacy organization, but we do consider public policy advocacy to be one of our important tools in the philanthropic toolbox. And we always have in every legislative session an education issue agenda that spans the spectrum and aligns with our strategic investment priorities in early childhood, K-12 education, and access and to and success in post-secondary education, and all of that with an overarching focus on proposals and issues that impact children and students who are furthest from opportunity. We are still finalizing our agenda, but in the early childhood space, we do expect to be supporters of the Early Childhood Coalition's agenda, and also to support the Early Learning Division's requests and what ends up being the governor's budget. But I'm here, as Sue said, on behalf of the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. I was asked to present two policy option packages from the HEC that I expect we will be able to support because they do align squarely with both our early childhood and our post-secondary focuses. The caveat is that I was not involved in developing these proposals. I may not be able to answer all of your questions, but I will share with you what I know. One is a large increase in the HEC's grant program for student parents. That's an existing program that students apply for through the Office of Student Access and Completion, which is also the portal for scholarships through the state. And scholarships that, of course, cover other costs like tuition or help with those costs. And the child care grant is dispersed through the students' college financial offices. It now reaches 80 students per year. This proposal would result in a quadrupling of the number of students reached to 320 per year, and would also increase the HEC staff to manage the program from part-time to full-time. The total cost is $4.2 million. It's obviously going to need to be coordinated with employment-related daycare, especially with access for student parents through that program expanding. It's clear to me that partnerships with culturally specific organizations in implementation of this expanded program are going to be really important to ensure that the program is widely known and as accessible as possible. The second proposal was developed in collaboration with the Early Learning Division. It's good to see Alyssa and team here because they can answer questions that I can't. It's a $5 million investment in a program that was actually created a couple of years ago, but never funded. And it would provide scholarships for students working toward degrees in early childhood education and or behavioral health for young children, such as mental health consultation. Also would be accessed through the state's scholarship portal, the OSAC portal. Some of the funds and decisions on how this would be divided up and allocated, some of the funds could be made available directly to institutions to strengthen their early childhood education pathways. From my standpoint, it's just great to see the HEC stepping more into these spaces as a stronger partnership in areas where they can impact the early childhood field. And also it goes along with Ben's recent joining of the Early Learning Council. I think all of it are signs that the HEC will be a stronger partner, and we're really pleased to see that. And that's what I had to share. I think that I sent the top descriptions to Remy, and I'm sure that those can be sent on to you if they haven't already been. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Louise, and we certainly agree with your comment about having HEC and Ben specifically be a part of the council is a huge asset to all of us. So, council, any questions of Mary Louise or Alyssa or whomever about HEC's grant program and also about the scholarships that I guess ELD is partnering on that proposal? Yeah, I agree, and they both sound great. As we all know, that for students, you know, the wraparound supports end up being as important as support for tuition, and it's frequently all of those other supports that preclude some people from being able to stay in higher ed or on a pathway. So having it be so comprehensive and inclusive is awesome.
And Sue, Ben told me that we don't have Oregon specific data, but that nationally almost 25% of students are parents in higher education institutions. So obviously really, really important.
Very important, and we need them to be able to complete their work. So any questions from council members? Okay, we'll be excited to support those pops as well. Thank you, Mary Louise. Good to see you again. Corey Milkey from the FACT Oregon and Colt suggested that we invite Corey. So Corey, good to see you again. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the council. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you today. My name is Corey Milkey. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Outreach and Training Director for FACT Oregon. And FACT Oregon serves as Oregon's parent training and information center. We're federally funded and also state funded. We help families of children and youth with disabilities, youth and their individuals with disabilities, community organizations, educators, policymakers, and others who serve families and youth with disabilities navigate and understand special education services and the rights afforded to families in accessing those services. We serve all 36 counties in the state of Oregon, and we provide services to all of the different school districts as requested. As family members ourselves, we know how important it is for families to be empowered to understand the early childhood systems that guide and set the tone for how their child will experience education for the rest of their life. Despite Oregon's dedicated work in early childhood and in early intervention and early childhood special education programs and our seamless transition, too many children and young children with disabilities are still missing the valuable opportunity to participate in community preschools. When disabled children are included in early childhood programs, we know that that's one predictor for more inclusive placements in the K-12 system. And we know that children who are disabled have higher math and reading scores, as well as higher social skills when they're placed in inclusive placements in those higher education settings. In response to an increase of young children with low incidence disabilities, so infants, toddlers, and young children with high needs disabilities, those are disabilities that require specialized instruction like services for deaf, hard of hearing, autism spectrum disorder, orthopedic impairment, traumatic brain injury, deaf blindness, and visual impairment, along with a decrease in funding to the regional inclusive services per child. The Oregon legislature in 2020 instructed the Oregon Department of Education to conduct a study on those regional inclusive services and how well they're serving young children. In 2022, the report was released, and the report revealed that there were pervasive systemic barriers that are impacting adequate service levels in early childhood spaces. So as an organization that provides support to families, FACT Oregon does not create policies, but rather we support our colleagues in identifying and providing testimony to those experiences for families. As we look to the future and the priorities for FACT Oregon, we will be addressing and looking to policies that address the systemic barriers that were identified in that Senate Bill 53 report, including staff training and having high quality early childhood and early special education teachers across the state who can provide equitable services. We also want to increase participation of diverse families in Oregon to ensure that families of children who speak a language other than English and also have a child with a disability are able to engage and participate in Oregon's early childhood systems and the decision-making tables. And we want to build strong partnerships in our early childhood systems. We know that in absence of a statewide public preschool process, that identifying preschools for placement of children with disabilities can sometimes be a challenge. We will continue to support our partners and do this work through one of our programs, Activate Your Advocacy, in which we spend a significant amount of time with parents of children with disabilities and help them understand the legislative landscape in Oregon, understand how they can better prepare and use their experiences to provide information that help the system move forward to create more robust, inclusive settings that prepare the whole family to be community members and valued members of their school community. We also are excited to continue to participate in other state teams like the Oregon Inclusion State Leadership Team, the State Interagency Coordinating Council, and this has created some really positive relationships with Multnomah County Preschool for All, where we're now making collaborations and progress to support families there understand what inclusive preschool really looks like. I appreciate the opportunity to share FACT Oregon's priorities with you, and I look forward to answering any questions that you have, and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Corey. I see why Colt recommended that we invite you to join us today. What a great overview, and obviously what a great focus you have. You'll see in our Raise Up Oregon plan that we certainly are trying to address and provide focus on the needs for these kids with disabilities and support for their families as well as for the children, which is obviously what you do. Yes, Peter.
I was going to say, Corey, FACT does great work. We do our preschool K-12 alignment summits at least twice a year, and we're inviting FACT to be an ongoing presenter at the summits for early child educators and K-12 educators to learn more about best practices for inclusion. So, great work on FACT.
Thank you so much. Your name was familiar, and I've had lots of conversations about the good work that's happening in Southern Oregon and early childhood right now. So thank you for your commitment to families.
Subin?
Corey, thank you so much. It's great to see you. And one of the questions that I have around the report, you mentioned workforce. I know we've been talking about workforce a lot in early childhood, but I just know anecdotally that the workforce issue in early intervention, early childhood special ed is particularly acute. So can you describe that a little bit, or just give us a picture of what that is like?
Yeah, I can. Thank you for the question. In Oregon, currently, most of our higher education programs are starting to close those programs that in turn provide those high quality specialized educators who are really well skilled in things like autism spectrum disorder and have those specialized skills to support that, along with sign language, orthopedic. And so what's happening in Oregon currently is that we're only turning out educators every few years because there's so many programs in higher eds that are not having as many teachers entering the workforce. That's one issue. That's not the only issue. And I wish I could say that it was a simple. That report actually highlights 4 different areas related to funding, related to formulas, related to higher education, that all need to be addressed in separate systemic ways in order to meet the needs of the early childhood system for young families. So I hope that helps answer some of that question.
Yeah, great work. Any other questions from council members? All right, Corey, thank you for your leadership in this. And obviously your close connection to families as well as partners is right, in line with what we're trying to do with our community outreach as well. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chair Miller and members of the committee.
All right. So council, we're going to jump back up to not Kimberly, but her substitute, Jasmine Cochran, is here to represent the, I guess, the Community Reinvestment Initiative. I'm assuming that's who we're going to be hearing from.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chair Miller and the members of the council. I'm so excited to sit in on this meeting. It's actually my first time ever sitting in a meeting like this. And so I'm just, grasping as much information as I can so that I can give it back to our executive director, Kimberly. And so if some of you don't know what PCRI, who we are, what we do, we are a nonprofit organization that provides low-income housing to people in North and Northeast Portland, primarily people of color. So I deal with families of, all ages, race, sex, you name it, that's what we deal with. And so I believe for me today, this is going to be really informational information that I can possibly pass on to some of our parents as far as, some of the things that may be going on in the education system. So sorry for the stuffiness. I'm getting over this icky thing that's going on around here, but I am, like I said, excited to be here and grasp as much information as I can.
Awesome. Well, Jasmine, thank you for being here with us. And can you just describe a little bit more about what the Reinvestment Initiative does in North and Northeast Portland?
Yes. So we have hundreds of rental properties, let it be single family homes and or complexes. And we also have a home ownership program. So even though we rent, our overall goal is to have families get themselves in positions to where they become homeowners. And so we offer home ownership classes. We've built several different homes and duplexes or triplex units and a program that we call Pathway 1000. And so the goal with Pathway 1000 is over the next 10 years is to build several different properties in the Northeast area so that people that were pushed out can kind of move back into the area. And then what I do specifically, I am a resident services coordinator. And so what I do is I work hand in hand with our residents to help them maintain their housing. So whatever barriers they may have. So if it's barriers getting to and from work or getting their little ones to and from school or daycare, finding rental assistance, food, you name it, DV support, that's what I do specifically. And so we have that piece, the renters piece, the home ownership piece, and our ultimate goal is hopefully to help families build generational wealth. So.
Awesome. Boy, That's a goal that's being talked about at a lot of legislative committees that have been sitting in the last week. So, and certainly ours as well. Questions from council members or comments from your own perspectives? Subin?
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much for being here. So one of the questions I have is, as you're working with people, whether it's renting or getting towards home ownership, how often do you hear comments or hear families talk about early childhood education and care or other services, that we've been talking about?
Constantly. So my office is actually right next door to the Maya Angelou Head Start. And so I'm constantly dealing with families over there. And the one thing they're kind of talking about are the schools, like what schools should I send my kids to? Because I hear this about Harriet Tubman, things that, it's not a good school. I hear this about Boise Elliott, not a good school. So those are the main things that I hear, is that depending on what area we're located in, what schools are the best schools to send their kids to. They're really concerned about large classroom sizes, a lot of behavioral things, especially when we're talking about Harriet Tubman or Ockley Green middle schools, and the lack of support they feel for families of color. And so that's the biggest things that I hear, especially parents who have kids that are going from grade school to middle school. I see a lot of concern with those parents, because grade school, if you find a pretty decent school, you're not really too concerned until you realize, hey, okay, my little kiddo's no longer a little kiddo. They're kind of going into the preteen. Their education style is going to change. And maybe I need to be a little bit more involved in the school when it comes to like middle school age and high school age. So those are the biggest things that I hear a lot. And I know that there are also a lot of parents who are actually sending their kids to schools outside of, their neighborhood areas, because they feel like, well, this school has I feel like they can get a better education at this school, or there are teachers there that I can connect with that I feel like I can't connect with there. But also a lot of parents in this particular neighborhood where I'm at, which is like the Boise Elliott neighborhood, they send their children to Kairos. And my son is a Kairos kid as well. And I absolutely adore Kairos. I love Kairos. We've been there now for 5 years, and it's just a great school. So I kind of push to let them know there's different options as well. But Kairos, I am the biggest Kairos fan ever. So, that's one of the biggest conversations we have, though. It's that transition from grade school to middle school.
Well, another big Kairos fan joined the meeting a few minutes ago from another meeting. The founder of Kairos, in fact, Kali. So you're right. It's an
Thank you for the Kairos love.
Anytime.
Well, Jasmine, thank you for joining us today, but also for the important work that you're doing, supporting families in that really direct way, and building the relationships with them that you obviously have done is just critical for the benefit of them and their kids. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And now Courtney, Family Forward, welcome. Good to see you again, Courtney.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Miller. It's great to see you as well, and members of the council. So my name is Courtney Verano, formerly Hellstein. So check your spelling of my last name in your contacts. And I'm the Senior Political Director at Family Forward Oregon. And we are a statewide grassroots advocacy organization that organizes with mothers, childcare providers, early care educators, and other types of caregivers in really prioritizing changing systems that better support and honor care and caregiving. We believe that caregiving and particularly childcare and early education is the work that makes all other work possible. And we hold that really close and really value the work of all of our care providers in the state. However, today I am actually here. I want to, state that I'm here today on behalf representing the Child Care for Oregon Coalition. And we are a coalition of nonprofit organizations, labor unions, community advocates, parents, childcare providers, all working to build a comprehensive childcare system here in Oregon. So we have a pretty large membership organization, but our founding membership of the coalition is Oregon AFSCME, APANO, Children's Institute, Family Forward Oregon, Imagine Black, the Oregon Association of the Education of Young Children, SEIU 503, PICUN, and Unite Oregon. And we have been working together over the last 3 or 4 years. We kind of came together under a kind of shared vision of building, working overtime to build out a comprehensive, universal childcare system in Oregon that is equitable, affordable, culturally relevant, inclusive, developmentally appropriate, safe, and community-led. And I think for the purposes of this conversation, I just want to make it clear that as part of that kind of continuum system of care from birth, all the way through school age childcare system that we're working to build, and universal system that we're working towards, just so that it's super clear. Our kind of definition of that and a key component of that continuum of care is also early childhood education. So when I say childcare, know that I'm kind of talking about that full system. And we've been working in the last couple of years as a coalition, really coming around with this idea that if we really want to build a system that's fully going to benefit and see the results for the kids that are being served in this childcare system, then we also need to be building a system that works for parents and childcare providers and early educators as well too. And we've had some success in those recent years, and in many ways partnering in huge ways with the Early Learning Division. In 2021, we all came together to pass House Bill 3073, which establishes pretty soon here the Department of Early Learning and Care, and also made quite a few policy changes to the employment-related daycare system that is really focused on expanding equitable access and reducing barriers and really helping to open up that program so it works a little bit better and more seamlessly for the families and the providers that are involved. And earlier this year, during the short session, we came together again and advocated our little hearts out to get a historic $100 million investment childcare package passed through the Oregon State Legislature. And included in that are capacity building grants that I will dig in a little bit into as kind of a second part of my presentation. We worked on employment-related daycare rate increases for childcare providers as we start to do the work to move closer to setting our rates for ERDC based off of the true cost of care as opposed to the market rate. So those are just two examples of kind of what was included in that package. There's also some funding in there as well too to ensure help move along continued implementation of House Bill 3073 and making sure that the standing up of DELC is going as smoothly as possible and that y'all have what you need there. So with that background and knowing the work that we're doing as Child Care for Oregon and where over time where we're working to that universal childcare system, in 2023, we are, kind of continuing on that path. We've made a lot of progress, but as we've continually told legislators, that it will take, long-term, consistent, significant attention and investment over a period of time in order to reach that vision. We feel really confident in what we should really be highlighting and focusing, and what we hope to move forward in 2023. And it really falls into kind of three main buckets. So one is, for that first bucket is all about affordability and access. So we were really, really excited to see the Department of Early Learning and Care put forward Policy Option Package 102, which is really all about continuing that successful implementation of House Bill 3073, and really ensuring that those really important policy changes that to the employment-related daycare program that passed in 2021 are actually being realized, right? So we have all these really exciting changes that we've seen, for instance, that are going to be starting to take effect at the beginning of next month around expanded hours and student access and all of that. So that can all be traced back to 3073. But there's more that was included in 3073 that we will really see fully implemented through this POP. For instance, expansion of the program to all eligible children, regardless of implementation status, and moving towards 12-month of continuous coverage, which provides a lot of stability for families and the childcare provider serving them. So this is a really key priority for the coalition, and we're really excited to see the agency put that forward. So we'll be supporting that big time. Next, I think we also heard, I think honestly throughout many of the presenters that you've already heard, is that workforce in childcare and early education is a real struggle right now. And as I said before, I'll say it again, this sector, this workforce is the work that makes all other work possible. So we can really start to address our state's, larger workforce shortage issues at a systemic level when we start to address the workforce development and support challenges that we're facing in childcare and early education. So there's a handful of bills that we have been collaborating with partners on and various lawmakers. One that I'll just uplift is LC 2300 that we've been working on with Rep-elect Thuy Tran. And this is a bit of a placeholder LC at the moment. It suggests a work group to suggest, to work towards a set of recommendations to build more equitable workforce pathways and stabilization in the field. We've been working with partners in the Early Learning Equity Collaborative and other stakeholders on the ground. We think we're actually, maybe we still need the work group too, but we think we actually have getting closer to some actual policy changes that we might be able to do right now. And so we'll make sure to keep you updated as that develops. And then finally, even if tomorrow we woke up and we had all the resources we needed for a universal childcare program, and we had all the workforce that we needed, being compensated at the level that they deserve, we still wouldn't have the actual physical space in our state in order to actually provide and care for kids. And so through the Child Care for Oregon Coalition. Just want to shout out a lot of the work that Children's Institute did to help kind of lead a work group over this interim period to come up with LC 20 in partnership with a lot of different organizations to come up with LC 2627 that we're working with Representative Reynolds on, and it will actually create a early education or early childhood and care facilities fund. So an ongoing facilities investment fund to actually help us build out that brick and mortar space, and also help us renovate spaces that are already available, potentially support childcare providers who are operating out of their home and doing renovations to those spaces. So maybe they can serve more kids, things like that. So a lot of renovation and actually building out of new space to create more physical capacity. So these are our priorities. And I will stop here just to check on time for you all. There was a kind of second half that was just a little bit of background information on the childcare capacity grant building fund that was funded out of that $100 million allocation this year. I put in I'm not sure how you're all on timing, so I'm always happy to come back, but I did include lots of information in a packet and as well as in the rest of this slideshow, but I'll just stop there first to see what you would like, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Courtney, very much. You covered a lot of territory in a small amount of time, which is what we've had to ask everybody to do. And we are out of time. We need to go into our lunch break before we come back. And if you did provide a packet of information to Remy, then, okay, I'm seeing in the chat that it's going to be on the ELC drive, and I assume ELC website for everyone to take a look at. So we will review that, Courtney, and we look forward to working with you in the upcoming session and with the new governor in January. So thanks for all of your work. Obviously, Family Forward and CI are key leaders in the coalition. So thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Enjoy lunch.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. All right, we're going to take our lunch break. We will be back at 12:30 when Peter and Peg will present the Home Visiting System Committee recommendations for us. There's no intention that we're going to adopt anything today as a council, but we're going to review them, provide input, feedback, etc. And then figure out where do we go from here, and they'll be back on our agenda in January. So with that, have a great lunch, and we'll see you at 12:30. right, we are gathering again. So I'm just taking a quick look at the chat, council members. So Remy, why don't you, when the meeting's over, why don't you send out that packet of information from Courtney to council? I know it'll be posted on our website as well. And yeah, Katie, I agree with your comment about tracking those legislative concepts. Very interesting. And I think you all know Rep. Reynolds is chairing the House Human Services Committee in the upcoming legislative session. And one of her, I guess, her top priority is reducing child poverty. So I'm guessing there will be a lot of bills that go through House Human Services that are going to be near and dear to our hearts. But more to come. Okay, welcome back from a lunch break, everyone. Let's see, George has a COSA meeting, but he'll be back as soon as he can be. And Kali, welcome out of your other meeting for the day. And we will get started with our Home Visiting System Committee report. Council, you know that Peter and Peg have been co-chairing this committee for the last 3 or 4 months. And I want to personally thank both of them for the time they've invested in supporting the committee, supporting Christy Cox's amazing work as the consultant, helping to drive that process forward. And we look forward to the conversation with all of us in the next hour. As I said right before our break, the expectation is not that we're going to adopt these recommendations today, but we're going to review them, ask questions, etc. And then they will be on a future council agenda for next steps. So with that, I will turn it over to the Peter and Peg show, which is a great show. Watch this, everyone.
Well, good afternoon. I'll let Peg start us off. This has been a great experience to focus on this, and there's been tremendous work done by a lot of people, and Christy's done a great job shepherding it through. So, Peg, I'll let you kick it off.
I would agree. This has really been a great experience. I have experience with home visiting only from talking to parents who have been recipients of home visiting and having used it in a professional way. And boy, did I learn a lot about home visiting. So I appreciate that opportunity. I think we should have some slides somewhere.
Right on cue.
Great. So if we can move forward. Great. So this is what we're going to cover briefly today, just sort of the background on where these recommendations came from, a little bit about the committee and the working team, and how they were developed. Hopefully discuss some recommendations and any additions or strengthening if we need to. And then we'll hopefully have some time to talk about what the next steps are. That's, again, another hard step is how to go from recommendations to actions. And then Christy's going to kind of close off with maybe some early opportunities we have for some successes. So if there's the next slide. This was just a quick reminder of what the committee's charge was. There is a roster of the committee members in your packet. And there were some private partners from the Ford Family Foundation, from CCOs, and from Early Learning Hubs. And then some members that were fairly high level from the public agencies. None of these folks on the committee were direct service providers. And again, this is what we were assigned to do. So next slide, please. The working team really did all the hard work. And there's a list of who's on the working team as well. The plan was for this working team to have sort of a limited duration, only about 12 months. There were 3 co-chairs from agencies and the private sector, and they represented a broad geographic range of Oregon, from kind of remote, rural, and urban settings, a broad range of early learning professionals. Again, most of whom were not in direct service. And the intent was to have people that had the kind of the big picture view of home visiting and systems approach without any particular model in mind. I will say, I think the working team did an incredible amount of work, and then they presented that earlier this month to the home visiting committee, that then kind of gently revised those, and that's what we're bringing to you today. Next slide, please. This is kind of the process that it went through, that these recommendations, or people got information to develop the recommendations. Sort of 3 really labor-intensive reading materials. First, with the first month really being getting information about parents and family experience, and then the next month hearing from the actual home visiting workforce. And then phase 3 was the looking at systems and both reading and some listening with places from around the country, that, including in Oregon, that had some successful programs, to see if we could kind of borrow information from those. Then the committee also got further feedback from families about really what they needed and what was working with home visiting, what isn't working, and how we can make that better. And then they used all of those findings together with the parent feedback to really develop the recommendations. I will say that we really need to thank the working team for doing all that heavy lifting, and they did it in a very short period of time, had incredible reading assignments, and I think put out really thoughtful work. Again, I learned a lot from all of that. I think next slide. Peter, you're on.
Okay, so again, before we dive into the recommendation, the focus is on statewide home visiting collaboration, not particular programs. We acknowledge it's not a blank slate in Oregon. A lot of work has happened in pockets or on a small scale. The work includes an appreciative inquiry. The working team look for what's working so we can do more of that. The recommendations language is almost exclusively about what is needed to strengthen home visiting programs, not yet about the how, who, or when. That will be part of the action plan that gets developed. So next slide. So actually, let's see if we can jump, Remy, from the slides to the recommendations, just so we can go over them briefly. I think we need to stop the slide share and we can go to that packet if that's okay.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you meant, Peter. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I've got the recommendations up right here. Just a moment.
Very good.
Oh, I'm sorry, they disappeared. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to share them on my Google Chrome because my PDF viewer is always finicky. So here we go. Oops, sorry.
Thanks, Remy. So they are divided into these three major categories. The first one is financing. Dedicate resources and use change management principles to support regular convenings of home visitors, home visiting leaders, and home visiting cross-sector partners to learn about one another and one of those programs, share professional development trainings, and begin work to create stronger collaborations. First recommendation. Second one is Oregon will adequately, whoops, don't go too far. There you go. Oregon will adequately resource the implementation of home visiting system committee's recommendations, starting with FTE. The recommendations for dedicated state level FTE, provide leadership, governance structures, etc. And staffing at the regional levels that require a dedicated FTE to actualize the recommendations. So it needs to be coordinated by paid staff, both at the state and local level. Develop a clear process to align funds from public and private sources that can be flexibly and equitably finance implementation and maintenance of the home visiting system recommendations. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of all state funds that support home visiting to identify inequities in order to implement more equitable prioritization of the resource allocation. Then it moves into wages and policy, wages and pay equity. Using the recommendations to use data from a pay audit to inform strategies to improve compensation, including wage and benefits, with special consideration of pay equity for racially and linguistically diverse home visitors. A pay audit should include programs where home visiting is the principal method of service delivery, and for those for whom it's a supplemental or secondary service, such as Head Start or relief nurseries. And then the third group of recommendations, second group of recommendations around the workforce, recruitment and retention, collaborate and engage with cross-sector parties and all communities to address the challenges of recruiting and retention of an equitable and inclusive workforce. Implement known culturally competent strategies to make technical assistance to expand the workforce. Professional development system, the recommendation is develop a coordinated professional development system that will be available to all home visiting folks in the state. All roles within the home visiting workforce will be included and supported through that professional development system. Examine the potential for home visitors to gain community health worker certificates is one of the recommendations as well. This is really interesting on reflective supervision. The data that they got back from the people doing home visiting programs is that this is one of the most important items that keeps them in the workforce is reflective supervision. It was very strongly stated that it's just a requirement almost for the staff level people. So increased home visiting system capacity to equitably provide reflective supervision through training throughout the state. And an ongoing training, provide equitable access across all home visiting programs in Oregon for ongoing training and coaching to increase cultural competency as well as knowledge and skills. Then go down to the third section of recommendation has to do with the region and state structures.
Peter?
Yeah.
This is Sue. There's so many here. I'm wondering if we should just stop. You've gone through half of them so far and just see if people have any comments on those first 9 recommendations. And then we'll go to the last half, which are the region and state structures.
Sounds good. Questions, comments, or does it make sense?
I have a technical question. You mentioned PSU graduates that the reflective supervision, is it only offered through PSU? I'm thinking about sort of accessibility and any statewide program, just wanting to make sure that it's not just at one college in Portland, but that if it's that important, it seems like it should be accessible to people at different places.
Agreed. I think that's a recommendation. We have to make it accessible. Christy, could you handle that question?
Sure. Hi, Colleen. My name's Christy Cox. To folks here, my pronouns are she, her. On this particular one, I think that level, the parenthetical EG are examples of existing resources in the state. So the infant mental health endorsement is one, and that really attends to like the broad range of professionals working in the world of home visiting. So that's one example of how you can access more reflective supervision training. The PS Graduate School Certificate is another that has built-in reflective supervision. Another one called Facilitated and Attuned Interaction is yet another. So just to really highlight that there are some different mechanisms and tools already existing in Oregon that we could tap to help us to do this. And this
Got
certificate
it.
is
So
just one.
that's an example. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a comment probably more related to the how, not the what, as you were mentioning, Peter. But I'm going back to the financing. I think it's bullet point A and B. In terms of convening people, dedicate resources to support regular convenings. I know this through my work, through the programs work at CI and the work that I currently do at Teaching Preschool Partners, that change usually moves at the speed of trust, and it takes time to build that trust and those relationships. And so I just want to impress upon the idea that convenings in and of themselves won't solve the trust issue. It will happen through frequency and ongoing measures. And so I hope that the financing does cover that.
Well stated.
I think that was one of the hope, and Christy talked a little bit about that we can maybe get started on sooner than later, because I agree with you, Subin. It is all about the trust, and the sooner we get started on that, the sooner we'll have some success.
And I would just add, I think that's exactly, Subin, why it's under invest in relationships. And the lead off one in that. So I know that was a conversation both in the working team and in the committee. So
I left off the North Star too. I just jumped in the recommendations. The North Star that the group recommends is that state partnership in developing priorities and strategies in support of local decision making and implementation. So the idea that the state could help, set the parameters to what the programs could be, but how those programs are actually implemented in each community will be part of local decision making. Ready to go on?
okay, yep, thanks, Peter.
You bet. So region and state structures, recommendation is to create family-centered, easy to access entry points for home visiting and other services, basic needs, etc. Make sure they're centralized, coordinated, and agreed upon intake and referral processes. And this is pretty huge, the whole body of work in and of itself. The Home Visiting Collaborative has knowledge, experience, and expertise to help these local processes, such as mapping home visiting services and intersections, support with MOUs for data sharing, etc. Universal newborn visiting models are a mechanism in the home visiting referral chain. Under governance and leadership, the recommendation is for family leadership. Make sure there's a strong family voice presence in the leadership of the home visiting system, that there is state leadership to leverage and expand, and in some cases streamline existing home visiting advisory bodies, to find efficiencies and to better represent home visiting program staff and those with lived experience, to guide the development of a structured, comprehensive framework for home visiting that includes state local leadership, shared goals, stable funding, and paid staff and regional staff. Likely first step is to create an action plan to move these recommendations. The next recommendation is to do a draft home visiting system framework, which will result from a mashup of the Build Home Visiting System Planning Tool and the Ford Family Foundation's Home Visiting Systems Theory of Action. So we do have materials to work with. This the framework would include internal communications, leadership in governments, and financing. And is that it? Nope. There's more. Would also include a assessment and planning, the report on home visiting workforce, messaging, outreach, and coordinate intake and referral processes, all part of the planning of the mashup there. And then under data, establish and enforce a process for ongoing home visiting system assessment and data collection. Continuous quality improvement is CQI. So data and continuous quality improvement. Establish and support a process for ongoing home visiting system assessment and data collection, reporting to observe progress towards home visiting success, as well as assisting programs with ongoing quality improvement. integrate state level data interoperability and management to ensure accurate and useful data for decision making for the home visiting system. Under outreach and messaging, create a comprehensive model, inclusive marketing and communication plan to promote and raise awareness about home visiting services, purposes, and impact. Leverage existing communication pathways, etc. At the regional level, consider developing a single source for families that describes the types and purposes of home visiting programs in their region. And then aligning legislation and rule. Review statute, rules, and funder requirements of existing home visiting models to determine opportunities for improved alignment. Access and assure alignment for future home visiting model implementation. Collaborate with communities regarding introduction of new home visiting models. And I think that's it. Or is it? I think that's it. Yep. Great. So Remy, if we could drop this share and go back to the slides. And while we're doing so, any questions from anybody on those recommendations? So they're fairly clear. Just want to make sure people have time to at least look at them.
So are we having a general discussion now, or is there still more background before we jump into general discussion? I just want to know, Sue, how you want to, how we're
I
doing.
think there's a few more slides to go through, and then I think.
Great.
So again, that's just a kind of summary slide. We can go on to the next one. And then going from recommendations to action planning to implementation. The idea is to design an approach. What's the plan to develop the plan? What's the process and who are the people involved? And then looking for the consideration of staffing, who's going to be able to actually be the backbone of this planning, and then where's this plan going to live? Where's the home visiting system going to live in the state of Oregon? Different ideas were floated. I mean, is this something that would live with one of our universities, like the Oregon Parent Education program is centered at OSU. Next slide. And then these are, toss this over to Christy. I think you're going to go over these early opportunities, I believe.
Yes. Okay, sorry, let me jump in for a minute. I'd love to, Peter and Peg, if it's okay with you and Christy, I'd love to back up before we get into the early opportunities and go back to reactions to the recommendations as they are, the 18 that you just went through, Peter. So I think, Anne, it's sort of what you were saying. How about a general conversation about these recommendations? What's missing? If anything, what do you think of them? And then let's go into figuring out, so now what do we do with them?
Sounds good.
Sound okay? Okay.
So can I jump in, Sue? Is that okay?
Yeah, great.
So first of all, I just want to congratulate this team and this is an incredibly comprehensive set of recommendations that is really based on, I think, what we have learned about what the needs are for the system. And I can definitely detect Christy Cox's influence in this. Christy Cox, as you all may know, is a former colleague of mine, and she really developed the home visiting systems coordination pilot work that we've been doing in three counties. And I can see that the lessons that she learned and we learned from that are incorporated in here. So first of all, congratulations everybody for all of this. And I think I just want to point out in particular, Subin, your question about relationships, it was absolutely what I think Christy and we learned, because there are so many people who are so dedicated to home visiting, but they live in their world, and the need to build the collaboration and the collaborative relationships, it was absolutely critical for being able to create trust, for being able to recommend maybe clients from one to another so that you get the right service, to being able to fill service gaps, to make sure people aren't falling through the holes. So I don't think that there are many state level reviews of this kind that talk about the importance of trust and building relationships in this forthright way. And so I appreciate that that's in there. I love the fact that this is sort of a big picture of everything that needs to happen in home visiting. And so I am curious about the conversation that we're going to have next about what are our first steps to doing this and what are the priorities here. To me, I think these priorities around financing and the structures are the kind of thing that I was really hoping that this team would pick up on and lay out how some of those structural and financial questions were going to be addressed. The workforce, I think, is always an issue, and it's always going to be an issue, and so that's good. And I think in my mind, where I would prioritize is those financings and systems level questions, because I think the not that the workforce isn't important, it's just that's true for across everything we're talking about, basically. And then I guess a question that I have, Sue, for you and Peter and Peg is, what role do we as the Early Learning Council play now in the next steps in the going forward, and how much do we take leadership, or are we involved in learning and keeping the agenda going? So those are just some of the comments. Overall, I just think this is fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anne. And I don't know, Peter, and we are going to talk about in next steps, Anne, we certainly will talk about where does the council fit into those next steps. So maybe we can just put that piece on hold until we get to that next conversation. So I'd love to hear other comments from council members about these 18 recommendations. Do they kind of reflect what you're hearing, what you're aware of in your own communities and your own professional arenas? Are we missing anything? Hard to believe, but I guess it's possible. Yeah, Kali.
Well, I think I would build off of what Anne just shared. I think this is very exciting and a wonderful opportunity to support children in our state in a way that I think is driven by research in terms of the importance of home visiting models to supporting young children and families. My questions did go actually to the exact same things around infrastructure and financing and governance. And I'm also very curious, how does this intersect with the work that's happening at DELC with behavioral, social, emotional well-being, behavioral health coming out of the House bill that was focused on that, connected with the suspension and expulsion ban? The two kind of go hand in hand. And I know Trauma Informed Oregon is going to get a contract to do some work there. It seems like the system we're setting up should coincide and align with that work. And so I was sort of trying to picture where, when I look at the totality of everything, does this sit with this other work, and how are we ensuring that they're aligned so that we really have a seamless system? And I think the infrastructure pieces, as we know, it's been a challenge. You know, there are so many different things that I think are good things that implementation wise without the infrastructure aren't, you know, the impact isn't had. And so I would love to get more info as well about that piece of things, because it'll make a difference as to obviously whether or not we have the impact we want to have.
Kelly, you bring a great point too. There's also the CCOs are working on their social emotional metric. That's part of their effort now. So how does that align with this too? So it's a great point.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a really critical part of moving forward, is figuring out, you know, where does the suspension expulsion program live? You know, how are the hubs connected to all of this, and the CCR&Rs, and the whole system, the system as a whole is going to have to be considered, or we're going to have to really look at all those different pieces to really build a system. And as Peter and Peg keep reminding me, you know, there's already a lot going on. This isn't a blank slate, obviously, and figuring out, you know, where's the alignment even for funding of these many different efforts. I think the funding that's sort of missing, as I've watched, is for the coordination efforts which is have to come before we can actually focus on individual programs. I'll stop talking and go to Katie and then Sue Ben.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank you guys for that presentation. It's really impressive. Obviously, this is not my wheelhouse, it's yours. And it's just so comprehensive and human. And it's one of those aha moments for me in looking at that correlation of delivering that service, going to where folks live in a way that they want to be approached to help them out in so many ways. I just find really personally impressive. And I want to thank you for that.
Okay.
That's it.
Thanks, Katie. Sue Ben?
I mostly also wanted to express gratitude, and I was impressed by the report that came forth, and so definitely. And I think the lens that I agree also with something Katie said. This is your wheelhouse. This is something that I think you understand really deeply. The places where in my work where I intersect with home visiting is when working with preschool teachers or even elementary school teachers and offering up the idea of doing home visiting, and when they eventually do it, they themselves are changed and transformed and see the power and understand what happens. But it's that initial step that's always the hardest. And I just see so much fear and just misunderstanding around what home visiting is and what it isn't, and where they think the hangups are going to be. And so when we get to the how, and when we get to, because what I see this as a project for in terms of educators is we're asking people to do something different from what they're currently doing, or something in addition to kind of what they're doing. And so I think that's in those cases, I think there's a particular kind of type of plan that we're talking about that's a little bit different than, dedicated home visitors. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent point, Sue Ben. It's definitely a bigger field than the traditional home visiting slices. And this, one of the recommendations in here talks about being sure that we're working with non-traditional providers. So we are trying to broaden that field of support for sure.
I think one of the things that the recommendations address too is kind of the marketing, or the how we roll this out as something that is worthy of trust and is appropriate for whatever community that it is offered to. And because my experiences have been the same, that if I can encourage people in a gentle way to accept the home visiting, the vast majority of people really are pleased with it and feel like that's a positive service. I do think the other part of this is, and Cully, you mentioned about all the other programs that are going on. I think that's going to be the hard, one of the hard parts about building this, is because there's so many moving parts. We want to be sure that everything is integrated. And while there was a lot of work that went into this, I think the hard work is yet to come. I'm kind of a boots on the ground action person, and when I saw these, it's like, well, this is all great, but what do we do with this? So I think there's a lot of work yet to be done, but this is a good start.
Yeah. Peter, I think it would be helpful if maybe you talked a little bit about the thought we've tossed around, you, Peg, Christy, and I, about adding something under the governance leadership that would specifically address working with tribes, that we want to be very intentional about making sure they're a part of our conversations around governance. And yeah,
we did have a tribal member who wasn't able to be at the last committee meeting when we talked about these recommendations, and she had emailed after saying that she just wants to make sure that the tribes are recognized. And we talk about state, local, but it could be that we need to talk about tribal, state, and local instead of just state, local.
right. So we might want to add something, and Angie, you might be able to help us come up with some wording around that. It should be great. Okay, if there are no additional general comments about the recommendations, and certainly a lot of laudatory comments about them, let's, Peter, move on with our next steps, which we keep kind of touching on.
Sure. So Remy, if you go back to the slides, in what we, I mean, I was just made aware of this, and I think the legislature recently passed a bill, it could have been the short session, that requires insurance companies to cover home visits. I wasn't aware of that. And of course, the Oregon Health Plan covers home visit programs. So that's just something that, as part of our marketing, I think we need to be able to tell people this service is available for you, and you are covered for it. So I think that's a real positive. So Christy, I'll toss this back over to you.
So Remy, back to the other slide. You're ahead of us. We want slide 8. Thank you. Okay.
Well, basically, this is just we had mentioned briefly before. Now we're talking about how do we develop the plan to develop the plan. In Peg's word, how do we just start getting to work on this? So we did talk about the, we need to identify what the process is to develop the plan. Who are the people involved? Khalid mentioned some of the people that have to be involved, the same people that are developing other parts of this comprehensive early childhood system. Who's going to staff this effort? And then the overall question of where is this effort going to live? It needs to be considered as well. So that no decisions have been made on that at this point. So now I think we can go to the next slide.
Well, Peter, wait a minute. Sorry.
Okay.
I really want to get council input on this to see if you all have thoughts about, how are we going to even plan to put an action plan together? Who needs to be at that table? We know that it's going to be broad. As you know, the committee that Peter and Peg are chairing is an ongoing committee. So we're believing and assuming those committee members are going to stay engaged. But and the co-chairs of the working team have been fabulous. Benjamin from OHA, Gwyn from ELD, and Ruby from OCF. So we owe them a huge thank you. But I really would like to get your input and from your experience in how do you go from broad recommendations to actually trying to plan for implementation. What are your insights? What should we be looking at?
Sue, could I ask so how has the relationship with this committee and that subcommittee that existed before, how has that worked just in this process? Maybe Peter and Peg could reflect on that, because I wonder if that gives us any insights on and helping to answer your question, Sue.
Yeah, and Christy, maybe she staffed all of these. So maybe Christy could respond to that because she's closest to those groups.
Let me clarify, Anne, when you say you're not talking about the subcommittee that worked on the recommendations. You're talking about this informal group called the Home Visiting Collaborative.
Yes, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to clarify for the whole group. So the Home Visiting Collaborative was engaged in some ways during this process, but not enough. That would be my quick response there. And that the Home Visiting Collaborative, for folks who aren't aware of it, it's really made up, and it was brought together informally as a group of leaders of home visiting models. So there are dozen or more home visiting models in the state of Oregon, and that doesn't include a lot of times the smaller, more grassroots. These are more of the formalized, like federally with oversight and fidelity requirements and so on. Nurse Family Partnerships would be an example. Healthy Families Oregon would be an example, and so on. What I would say about that is that that group is a ready and standing informal group that has to be more involved in the next steps.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to that. And I think that I would also share that there was some very intentional consideration to not just have the collaborative be the working team, to
Right.
be the subcommittee. And that was largely because they all represent a particular model for the most part.
Right.
And we were really seeking to find broader, they also all are mostly based in Portland. And so to get a much broader perspective on home visiting systems and coordination and how it fits in a much bigger, the larger early childhood system. So that's just a little bit of background, but I hope it also answers your question, Anne, as I would say, not involved enough and lots more opportunity to build that in the next steps.
Great, thank you. And then could I also ask about the official subcommittee and whether the official subcommittee can also be to help lead this, drive the process for the next steps and the refinement of the next steps. And then once I have that picture, then I'll stop asking questions.
Yeah, I think I could be just completely honest with this group is just getting today has absolutely been the focus for, since like the very quick takeoff in August and really working September, October, November to get these well-considered recommendations in front of you. And I think the next step really demands a slowdown and a look at what has really worked in Oregon. So you have a huge Raise Up. I just listened to the rest of the council meeting earlier. You have this huge Raise Up Oregon plan in which like home visiting is plugged in several places. So learning about what has worked for ELD with DELC, what's worked for OHA, like all of these groups have done these major planning sessions. All of our early learning hubs and most of our parenting hubs have as well. Not to mention individual organizations that run specific home visiting or other early childhood models. And so I think it's a time to pause, also to seek advice from our peer states across the US who have done this and are about many, many years in front of us, I would say. I think we could also look backwards because back when the first maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting federal funds came out, which I think I'm going to look at 2010, I think is when those happened. There was also quite a bit of movement around system building. And so we can recapture some of those lessons learned as well and pull them forward. But I think this is the right time to stop, pause, do a little bit more appreciative inquiry on process work about how you get from something that feels probably very overwhelming or looks overwhelming to something that it can be made into, smaller bite-sized pieces and implementation. So how's that, Ian?
No, that's great. That's actually really, really helpful. And I really appreciate the second part of this slide that says, and what's written in this about needing dedicated state level FTE to actually make sure that this drives forward. Because I remember when we started this process a few months ago and we had December 1st as a deadline, I thought, oh, there's no way this is going to happen by December 1st, but you all did it. So well done. But I can imagine that now you've really got to start thinking about what the infrastructure is going to be to take this forward. And so you've laid out a perfect sort of big picture, and now we have to figure out how to take our next steps. So thanks.
And I see Subin has his hand raised.
So, on the question of, action planning and implementation, I already see evidence of this already in the work that happened. But one of the beliefs, or not just a belief, but a theoretical construct in terms of doing implementation is this idea that I hold, which is the people closest to the change are best positioned to design the change, right? And so I think what's complex about this planning is we're talking about different levels, we're talking about different regions, we're talking about state entities, we're talking about, and then also just on the ground. And so that's the complexity in terms of I envision or see this multi-tiered planning group that that happens in this parallel way. I think the Early School Success Initiative at Children's Institute is kind of formulated off of this idea of the people closest to the change have so much to offer. And so, but the trick is, and some of the pitfalls is, when putting and dreaming up those groups, is to not tokenize or objectify people when they're part of that group, that they have true power and voice in terms of the planning. And the other part of it is making sure that that part is actually resourced, because we're asking people to do a lot and to give a lot into that process.
Yeah, and good example. Kali.
I'm not sure about the action plan, but it occurs to me that hubs have to be a part of it, and because of their regional proximity. And I would love to see CCOs be connected to it because of the work they're doing around the social emotional metric. And in some communities, the hubs are working with their local CCOs, but it's not across all communities. And that feels like an important connection point. So I think I would offer that. I also, Christy, you made a comment about the large, federally funded programs. And I would say it's really important that this group, I think they're great programs, and particularly Nurse Family Partnership Program, which I know our organization has supported and advocated for. But some of these programs have not served diverse communities well. So while they are large and federally funded and sort of trusted, the reason why I think some of the informal programs are successful is because they do have trust in community, and they have not done things that are harmful to communities. So I'm not trying to make any large swath generalizations about any particular home visiting program. I just know that it's important to have a mixed system of providers, because I know that the listening sessions that Peter and I did in communities of color and rural communities, this trust thing was central to every one of those listening sessions. And having people come in their homes was not something anyone was like, sign me up for. So to me, it's like, who can do this work well? And, I feel like you can train people on how to do the work, but how to build the trust and be accepted and honor the families that you're serving, that is so important. And I that was something that I remember from the listening sessions popped up across all groups. So just offer that.
Yeah, thanks for referring back to those listening sessions that you and Peter helped to set up for us. We did learn a lot from them. Yeah, Subin.
Something Kali said reminded me of something. Going back in the plan that we were just presented, there were multiple bullet points about the workforce. And while I think it's important and great and good to look for lived experience as part of the hiring qualifications, making sure that we're hiring a diverse workforce, I think as part of the onboarding and part of the training of the work, there needs to be attention to whether it's harm reduction or creating conditions of safety, making sure that, to Kali's point of going into someone's home and establishing trust, I think that's part of the job. And so I distinctly remember we heard a presentation as part of the Partnership for Preschool Improvement Project from New York City when they were hiring folks for their universal preschool program. And so as part of their training and part of their onboarding, that was one of the things that they did, was that they talked about and planned for what are the potential areas where harm can be done and how do we avoid that and what do we do in these types of instances. And it was part of the training.
Great. Thank you. Good points. Good points, Subin. So let me just answer the question Anne asked about 15 minutes ago that I sidebarred about the council's role in this. And then I'll let Peter and Peg agree or not, since they're the co-chairs. One of our roles is going to be maintaining the momentum that has been built over the last 4 months and making sure that we keep home visiting, and which is really support for the prenatal to 3 age group, which in my opinion, we've not focused on in the last several years. But to keep a focus on the prenatal to 3 and home visiting is one avenue and in one way in which to do that. So I think the council role will partly be having Peter and Peg stay as co-chairs of that committee and keep the committee engaged and active. A second role that I see the council playing is to make sure our agency partners, the directors of our agency partners, are engaged in this process. And part of that is probably going to have to be under the other considerations and the staffing and FTE to make this happen. You know, it's not a DELC home visiting system. It's way bigger than DELC. So I think we need to be working with our agency directors to say, how are you going to support this moving forward? So that's a role the council's played in other ways in the last several years, and I see that being a primary role that we're going to need to play in this specific case. And Peter and Peg, you may have other ideas of where the council will fit into this process moving forward.
I think you touched on it. I think the council needs to make sure that the focus stays on the issue and on building the system. It needs to be the pusher, the nudger. I do also think your comment about FTE from other agencies. I mean, this might be an Oregon Health Authority FTE or a DHS FTE, but I think Oregon Health Authority, since we want to tie into the CCOs too. So yeah, I think that, and also the alignment and the communication with the hubs too. I think the council has a role there with DELC to make sure the hubs are involved in the conversations.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. Peg?
That is the key piece. And I don't know, you all know more about where funding is best going to come from, but I think that's the real key piece, is that we need to really have staff to move this forward and to start with some action now. I think, you can plan and plan and plan, but you got to kind of get moving too. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I think that's not to say that we recklessly avoid the planning. I just think that sometimes that begins to unfold as you start to make some actions. And I agree, from the ground up, home visiting is about trust and relationships. And that's the success or failure of it. And it really needs to start with the various programs, the various people that are involved, the agencies and providers that are involved, and work its way down to the families. And I think that's something that we can start building on now. But it's going to take some money, and I'm not sure where that comes from.
Got it. I agree, Peg and Peter, with both of your comments. And so that's probably a great segue into the next 6 minutes of where are some of these short-term opportunities. I want to make sure the council's aware that fortunately, we are going to have Christy with us and helping to lead and facilitate this process for another 3 to 4 months. And as you know, she's not full-time. She does have a life outside of this, but we're going to have her able to help us figure out some of this planning for the action plan. And I think that continuity is going to be critical for us to really make some progress. So thank you, Christy. Oh, and I should just mention, I want to thank Ford Family Foundation, the ELD, and OHA for collaborating and braiding their funding so that we could hire Christy as our consultant. Another one of those public-private partnerships that's really critical. So Anne, thank you for your help with that. Okay, Christy.
Great. Well, we don't have a lot of time, and none of these things will we go into in depth, but after sitting through the Raise Up Oregon review, the 2.0, that it feels very comprehensive, and the idea that every bullet point is just the tip of a pyramid makes things feel a bit daunting. Where everything's comprehensive and it's hard not to feel overwhelmed. And so I would just offer up that I think there's a lot to feel hopeful and excited about for the various reasons that have already been talked about, that nowhere in Oregon are most of these things a blank slate. There are a lot of things to build upon, to celebrate, and to strengthen and grow. I pulled out these particular recommendations just to highlight because they came through our working team members, the working team co-chairs, committee feedback, the home visiting committee feedback, and also during some of the interviews that I conducted early in the process. So these are things that others believe, and I agree with them, that could be more quickly acted upon, or may not take years and years and years, right? There are things that may need some resources, but not a huge amount. And so that's what I mean about early opportunities. And so I would start with the investing in relationships, that it doesn't take a huge chunk of money. It does take the support of individuals, and to not only convene and offer, childcare and other things that people might need to be able to attend, but also to break bread together and offer meals and make those settings feel good. But also be purposeful and mindful. And those things do take effort, and they do take resource or help or mentorship. And so investing in relationships, and I would really highlight back to the Ford Family Foundation's work, and I know we've shared it, but happy to share it again, that they've done every year an annual survey of partners in each of those 3 regions that are being funded through that home visiting system project. And the astounding increase from baseline to year 1 for the level of trust between individuals, self-reporting, the amount of communication between individuals, the knowledge of one another's programs, the likelihood that I would call them on the phone to refer a family, like all of those things went from the low 20s, like 20% of people were feeling like they had that level of trust, up into like 60s and 70s after a year of gathering. Networking, gathering, sharing about one another personally, but also professionally in their programming. So I really believe that this is low-hanging fruit. This is really important early opportunities for people to think about. That it doesn't take a lot, but it does take intention. The second one I would say also, you have already, and Subin, you referenced it, that this is already happening. Like a lot of these things are happening through this initial 3 or 4 month project. This alignment of home visiting system funds funded me to be able to help to support the committee and the subcommittee. And I think that it's very reasonable to consider that DHS, OHA, DELC, private philanthropy, and potentially others have the means to also pool funds or align funds or braid funds, kind of whatever verb there best suits the situation, particularly to fund staffing. And it really, at minimum, needs to be full-time at the state level. And at minimum, and that person needs to have a great deal of support if it's just going to be 1 FTE. I also believe, like, I would kind of lump together, and I do acknowledge the comments that were made earlier that workforce maybe not. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
The way you said that, would you recommend it not just be 1 FTE? Like, what would you recommend as the, because the way you said that, I thought, oh dear, we should probably not just have 1.
No, what I mean, I do think 1 FTE is probably an amazing and lovely starting place, but that person can't be doing also all the data analysis or all the data collection, or it has to be really in partnership with those state agency or private folks as well. Like those state agency and private folks need to be given the authority to give some time and energy, or maybe a lot of time and energy. But that's also hard because all of those state agency folks already have full-time work in place. Right. So that's what I mean. Like, it's sort of this FTE with some wraparound support to do some of that hard work. So maybe it's FTE plus some consultant behind the scenes or a data person. I'm not sure exactly, Kali, but thanks for helping me kind of articulate that better. Yeah. I would, so I just was going to acknowledge some of the earlier comments that maybe workforce isn't the first place to start, but I would also note that it's probably one of the easier places to start, again, because it has a lot to grow from or to make more equitably available, or even frankly, just to market better, to make sure that everybody across any home visiting program, federally funded or grassroots organization, that they understand the opportunities around infant mental health reflective supervision, that they understand what kind of ongoing training is already available. We can look and see if that needs to be augmented or boosted, or if it's just not getting out to the right people, or if they don't have enough time, or, you know, like what are the barriers for people already to participate in some of these existing pieces already. And that reflective supervision piece being both a, you know, a retention strategy for home visitors, but also a quality improvement strategy. It's one and the same. It helps people do better work, but it helps them feel better and safer in their work. And I would also just note, Subin, I'm happy to share this, but from our workforce findings, actually, that's one of the biggest, most loveliest positive findings is most home visitors feel very safe and they feel very supported in the work they do going into homes. So that's a nice thing to actually to reflect on from that field. So
can I
I would share.
Can I just
go ahead,
on
Ann.
that? Because I really appreciate, Christy, how these early opportunities have sort of parsed out the ongoing training and the supervision of those who are in the workforce now versus thinking about the need to develop a whole, you know, with an ambitious workforce development agenda. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm really supportive of what you're saying here, which is we have a workforce now that needs ongoing training and supervision and so on. And that is something that we can work on soon. So I just want to endorse that and make it clear that when I was talking about workforce, I was thinking about this huge workforce challenge, whereas I think you've picked out something here that's really important and doable.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the clarification, and I appreciate hearing that. I'll just quickly touch on the last two as well, which the family leadership, we've got lots of models, lots of early learning hubs, lots of OPEC groups, lots of organizations across Oregon, as CCOs and et cetera, already have some kind of family engagement leadership. And those things are not leveraged enough, and they're not resourced enough. They don't have what they need probably to do what they might be asked to do or that they want to do. Right. So I think that idea of resourcing these and making sure that whether that FTE that we talked about earlier is helping to support that, or if that's something else, but we could leverage and grow those and streamline those, I believe, fairly quickly. And then the last one is outreach and messaging, which I think this actually came, Peter, it may have been actually your comment that kind of got it on this early opportunities list, is that outreach and messaging about what home visiting is probably very doable to try to help explain and raise awareness about what it is broadly across the entire state, and whether you have young children or not, to raise awareness around it, to normalize it. The Oregon Parenting Education Collaborative spent, I'd say, a couple years really diving into this question of messaging and trying to normalize parenting education through messaging. So you have things to grow on there, and I'm sure that there's 10 other efforts that have happened in Oregon around outreach and messaging to help to try to connect with families or to normalize something, or just even to raise awareness about programming. So I don't think that would take a lot to get a set of, you know, lovely, appealing, tailorable products out that communities or regions or organizations could use for themselves and share with both the community at large and families particularly.
Awesome.
I would just share that like on a hopeful and exciting, that there's a lot that could be done in a shorter period of time and a lot to do for the long term as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy, Peter, and Peg. Thank you very much for getting us to this point, and for being chairs of this committee moving forward, since we're trying to get to the beginning line. Christy keeps reminding me we are perhaps there today. So thanks a lot. So more conversations later, council members, about home visiting. We need now to move to rulemaking, because there are some rules that we need to adopt today. So I would like to welcome Alicia Gardner again. She's not a stranger to us. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Alicia Gardner. I am the OCC director in Early Learning Division. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to present the slides I have for you all today. So today I am here to bring forward some rulemaking regarding our central background registry. In February of this year, Senate Bill 1547 and House Bill 4005 required personnel from unlicensed facilities, particularly license exempt subsidized care facilities and recorded programs, both school age and preschool, to enroll as subject individuals in our central background registry. In June 28th, 2022, the ELC passed temporary rule language addressing this issue and allowed personnel to enroll into the CBR. So just a quick review of what we have done so far. Recorded program personnel have had the ability to enroll in the CBR as of September 1st, and new staff that are hired are required to enroll as of January 1st of 2023. Staff and volunteers associated with that program prior to January 1st, so those who are already working in the program, have until June 30th of 2023 to submit an application. And if they submit an application to OCC, their prior background check is valid as long as the application has been submitted to us, and it will remain valid until we take action on that application. For license exempt childcare providers receiving subsidy, new license exempt providers have been required to enroll as of September 1st, 2022, but those who are current and have a current ODHS background check can continue to operate until their recertification, which is up to 2 years, and then enroll within the CBR. So in doing this in our temporary rulemaking, we have allowed for a little bit of a rolling application process. We did hold a RAC for this rulemaking, for permanent rulemaking. The primary feedback we received in the RAC was regarding the clarity that was needed from programs in these commercial buildings that are kind of residing in a larger organization. So the way I like to throw the example out is if you're in a community center, but you are renting out one classroom, what do you do with all of the staff that are running the community center that aren't necessarily directly involved with the children or the program? We already have a standing practice in Office of Child Care that individuals who are not affiliated with the program but are housed within that larger building are not required to enroll in the CBR as long as that program can ensure there is no unsupervised contact with those children, and that program is responsible for ensuring that. This would not apply to any program staff or volunteers since both are required in statute to be enrolled in the central background registry. So as far as any changes that go from our temporary rulemaking to our permanent rulemaking, you will find that there is not a ton of changes in the rules. However, there are minor technical changes, some general reorganization for clarity. We rearranged some rule language to eliminate the need for some of the references of the September 1st, 2022 timeline, since that timeline has come and gone. And then we also added one clause in our rulemaking for recorded programs that during that time period between January 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2023, where they are just required to apply, we've also put in a clause that the individual has not should not have had an issue of a notice of intent to deny from Office of Child Care, because at that point we will have had information on that individual that we think is concerning enough to deny their background check enrollment. As far as the CBR rule set goes, again, you will find minor technical changes, such as we updated language from Child Care Division to Office of Child Care, general reorganization or rewording of clarity. And then we also changed the reference to regulated subsidy to replace it with a more a broader term called subsidized care facilities, which not only includes regulated subsidy providers, but also programs that receive subsidy that are not regulated subsidy providers. So that way we can ensure that we're including them as subject individuals as well. Now, this goes with all saying that, we had to say a little bit about our CBR backlogs that we're encountering at the moment. So just to share some information with you all on that, during fall 2022, Office of Child Care received twice the amount of applications that we normally receive. And we were also at our lowest staffing point with only 5 individuals actually processing those checks. We were significantly short-staffed during that time. In fall 2022, we have a total of 19 positions in our background customer service and intake units. The good news is that we have created some new positions out of vacancy savings, and we also received positions in the bills that were passed earlier in February 2022. So we're looking to more than double our background customer service and intake teams, and those will be fully staffed by January of this year. And we hope to get that group trained and up and running by mid-January. This backlog has also leveraged a lot of resources in that we're looking to make a lot of improvements in our operations to ensure that we don't get into this situation again next fall. And also, as we're moving to put these individuals in the background check, we want to ensure that there is everything we need to prevent the backlogs in the future. So we have identified several improvements to our operations so far. One is that we're using Power BI to create new manager reporting tools, so the managers have everything they need to understand how to prioritize and ensure that people who are really needing the checks to move forward quickly and see where checks are at any given time. We've also launched a project to improve our written processes and procedures, and so that work has begun. We've also launched a project around improving our database in the tracking of assignments. So in our database called CRIS, we have different ways we track things, and we're going to improve the different steps in which we are tracking them in our central background registry, just because there are so many steps that an individual has to go through to get approved, many different checks that you have to go through to get fully enrolled in the CBR. Lastly, we are working with DELC's PMO office to look at all of our processes internally with lean leaders so we can identify efficiencies and improvements and fold those into our written processes and procedures. So with all of these and likely more as we move forward, want to just highlight that we are prioritizing this work every single day to get out of the backlogs and ensure that everybody has access to a check quickly and timely so we can get childcare staff to work when they're needed to work. And I'll pause there for any questions or comments.
I'm sure we're all very happy to see the improvements that you're listing, Alicia, because I'm sure we've all heard concerns about the backlog. And maybe you said this and I didn't hear it, but what's the backlog today? How are we doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me see here. So right now we're in the process of tracking our different amounts of approvals and checks. I will say that at this point in time, what I've looked at in the numbers is that we have always been slightly behind with the amount of approvals that we're able to do versus the amount that we've received for applications. Again, pointing back to the database improvements and tracking of assignments, because there are so many steps in the approval process, it is difficult to get exact numbers based on how we track the assignments currently, which is why this improvement is so important. So we can really look at the data in a way that is easily to report out, easy for us to track, and also know where applications are in the process and pull aggregated data at any given time so we can ensure that this does not occur again. So what I can say is that we are, for October, I'll just say that we have received around 2,500 applications received. We have approved around 1,500 applications. And for November, we received 2,500 applications and approved 1,300. Again, we are in the process of hiring and training many individuals in this team. So, I think part of the lag that we're still experiencing is within the hiring and training of those individuals. We're really hopeful that by January, mid-January, we will have everybody up and running. We've already we've put together start dates of January 3rd for those individuals. So after a couple of weeks of training, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to start getting things really flowing much faster than we've been able to do so far.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. And partly I wanted the council to just be aware of the numbers we're talking about. It's not like a couple hundred are coming in, we're in the thousands. So we just need to understand why staffing is so important.
Yeah, for additional context, in January, we received 1,500, which compared to August, September, and October, it's pretty close to double each month of that. So it's a significant number.
Yeah. Council, any questions of Alicia about the proposed rules? If not, I'll ask Peter if he would put some motions on the table, and we probably should just take them one at a time, Peter, for the record.
So I'm trying to get my packet to load here. Remy, I don't know if you could help me by put the language on the screen. I'd be happy to make the motions.
Happy to put the language on the screen, but I've got to pull it up first as well. Thank you. Let's see. Here we go.
If anybody else has the language in front of you.
I've got it right here, Sue. I did it. Here we go. Okay, so. Oh. Everyone can see that, right?
Yep. Just need to go down to the motion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you want the motion?
I think the motion's higher. It's the second page of.
I didn't realize you wanted the motion. I thought you wanted the actual language. I'm sorry.
No, I want Peter to be able to make the motions that we need to pass today.
We got the motion right here.
Page 2.
There you go.
Okay.
Angie, Remy, I think Angie has a question.
Thank you. I do. I'm looking at, well, it's page 31 of the packet, and I'm trying to see. It's after definitions. There's a section there. It's the letter small k that's just really confusing. And I'm just wondering if somebody could explain that to me. On or after July 1st, 2025, and beginning September 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025, unless holding an unexpired DHS background check.
Absolutely. That's relating back to, I put sort of a plain language version of that up on my slide, but it really is related to this rolling process where if you already have an approved background check with ODHS's background check unit, you are allowed to remain active on that for up to 2 years. And then once it comes up for expiration, you will then be required to enroll in the central background registry. So it is something that we built in intentionally to ensure that we're kind of getting it on a rolling basis and not requiring everybody to enroll all at once and have that massive shift. We'll be able to have a touch point with that individual as they come up for expiration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Angie. Okay, any other questions of Alicia? If not, Peter.
I move to adopt the proposed language dated December 14th, 2022 that amends OAR Chapter 414, Division 061 and rule numbers 0010, 0020, 0030, 0060, 0075, 0090, 0100, and 0110.
Is there a second for that? Somebody.
This is Angie. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion carries. Peter.
I move to adopt the proposed language dated December 14th, 2022 that amends OAR 414-525-0030.
Okay, it's 425, just for the record.
425.
Gosh. Okay. Angie, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And lastly,
I move to adopt the proposed language dated December 14th, 2022 that amends OAR 414-450-0030.
thanks, Peter. Is there a second? Thanks, George. Any discussion?
Yes.
Angie.
How is B different from C? I think that last two digits are supposed
So
to be,
they're different
425 and
divisions.
450. Okay.
Yeah. Recorded
Okay.
preschool, recorded school age.
But in our packet, it says 0010. So I just wanted to point that out.
00. Okay, but the motion is 0030. Okay, those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thanks, Alicia, and good luck in bringing all those new staff members on.
Thank you very much.
It'll be very, very important. And now, Kayla, what do you want to tell us about in the next 5 minutes?
I know. Thank you, Sue. I'm trying to stick with your well-oiled machine and try and breeze through this PowerPoint presentation. But David and I really just wanted to make sure that we were bringing you guys an up-to-date view of the anticipated DELC rulemaking needs coming up in the springtime. And so with that in mind, I just want to take us quickly, like Sue said, in a couple of minutes through rules that DELC, the agency, are going to need and ELC will have to adopt, a primer on ERDC rulemaking actions that are going to be needed and the sort of content expectations that we'd like to set and make sure we're all aligning on, and then just some recent and expected updates to ERDC policy generally that ODHS and ELD have been working on over the last 12 months and will continue working on over the next 6 months into the transition period. Are there any questions up front that I can take, or should I just launch? Hearing none. Okay, and getting the hand wave from Sue, I'll jump right in. So there are 3 rules that DELC proper, DELC as an agency, will need to carry out its duties from an administrative viewpoint. Those 3 are ensuring access to public records. Every agency needs some controls around how records are requested and any associated fee structure so that it's stable and predictable for all parties. Work is ongoing internally to look at how to shape that. We currently have a policy, and we'll make sure that, you know, we're sort of looking at it, making sure it's fresh, and if it needs any amendment, that we're making those small tweaks. Mediation confidentiality, which is really a Department of Justice model rule, allowing the agency to make mediation negotiations confidential with external parties. And the third being authorizations for employees to appear on behalf of the agency in certain hearings. This is a very administrative rule in terms of allowing someone who is not a lawyer or a legal authority to represent the department in administrative proceedings, such as contested case hearings, whether it's for subject matter expertise or to sort of outline the agency's policy position, et cetera. That's a very sort of DOJ, good governance, making sure that those administrative proceedings are handled with like due care, and there is a rule associated with agencies being able to do that. So these three rules are things that the agency will need to function and will be brought before the council after a notice and RAC engagement process in the springtime. And just a reminder that all rules that ELD has currently are going to flow right into DELC's own rule structure. So everything that ELD has currently adopted, DELC will have adopted as well. Any questions on that? Going once? Twice? Peter, anything?
No.
Okay. Moving us right into ERDC, which is really the pretty big bucket of rules. So as everyone is aware, DELC will be inheriting ERDC, the Employment Related Daycare Program, from ODHS. What that means is that DELC will need its own rule set governing ERDC. Because of the volume and the incredible complexity of how the program operates, especially as a part of the one eligibility system, the primary goal of transferring the ERDC program from ODHS and ELD's perspective is continuity of service and operations for Oregonians. We do not want a single day to go by where there's no access to the program, where people can't get childcare benefits, and where providers aren't getting paid. So with that in mind, we are going to essentially preserve the status quo in order to transfer the program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But over the next couple of ELC meetings, because the status quo is pretty massive, there's a lot of policy provisions in there. There's a lot of provider rate provisions in there. There's a lot of administrative procedures in there, such as hearings or overpayments. It would be a pretty large lift to go through and do that rule set all at one time with the council. And so we're preparing to bring you sort of small slices of the ERDC program over the next couple of ELC meetings to familiarize everyone with what's actually in these rules, what policy are we talking about, what provider requirements are we talking about, what administrative proceedings are we talking about, so that we have a little bit more of a bite-sized look at how ERDC will function as a rule set once it moves over to DELC. And that way, when it comes time to actually adopting the rules, there's more familiarity with it. And so that's the overarching plan that we just wanted to bring to your attention. And you'll start to see rolling through the next couple of ELC council meetings. Any questions about that? Okay, fast talking, going into ERDC rule content expectations. As I mentioned, the primary goal is making sure we have that continuity of service. So what that means is, while there is obviously a lot of room to make changes to the ERDC program over an extended period of time, in this short window where we're really just transitioning the program right over to DELC, there's not a lot of latitude to make rule changes. There's not a lot of bandwidth in terms of agency resources across the two teams, because all of the staff who are currently trying to make sure that the program is running are also working on the transition. And additionally, and most importantly, nearly all policy changes to ERDC require very extensive changes to the one eligibility system, which often has very long lead times. There are a lot of IT components to making sure that the ERDC program runs as a part of one, and even small tweaks to policy positions or policy parameters often have very long downstream effects in the one system, with lead times that range into, the multiple, sometimes double digit in terms of months. And so while we may identify some policy changes that we might like to see in the coming future, there's not a lot of latitude at this juncture to actually start talking about how to effectuate those policy changes in the near term. So when we bring these ERDC rules in front of you over the next couple of meetings, what we're really talking about is familiarizing ourselves with the status quo, what we're inheriting from the program, and looking forward, what we might want to identify as things to further look into and refine, but really for the time being, talking about what we're inheriting and how we can make sure that operations continue on day one of DELC. Any questions there? Or David or Alyssa, do you want to refine anything that I said?
If it's okay, I think just the one thing I would underline, as I do think there's a real and deep commitment over the long run to really take a good look at the ERDC rules, see where there's opportunities to make things better for children, families, and providers. So I think what we in this process do want to capture where there's opportunities to change the rules in the future, improve policy. But as Kayla, I think, has really emphasized, our number one goal is to make sure that there's no break in services as part of this transition process. And in order to be operating on July 1st, we do need the rules to be in place. And I think just the other piece is that the process of migrating the rules, even without changing the content, is actually not a simple one, because they're actually currently very integrated with rules for other programs. So it's actually just even the slicing and separating out is has actually a fair amount of complexity, which Kayla has actually been spending months navigating through.
Yes, the excision, as I like to call it, is quite a delicate game of operation. Thank you, David. I think that that's absolutely the right underpinning for that. And then, Sue, I know we're at time, a little bit over. I just want to breathe through this. There have been some recent policy changes to ERDC. I think some of these were actually talked about earlier in the council meeting today. Changes to the copay and the rates for providers, as well as making sure that the ceiling for ERDC in terms of the income level is in alignment with SNAP, which actually allows a little bit more expanded eligibility, happened over the last couple of months and years, and moving us into upcoming policy changes to ERDC this upcoming January. So a couple of weeks from now, some of the eligibility expansions from House Bill 3073 will go live, so to speak. That includes a shift to part-time or full-time authorizations. Families are no longer going to be getting need-specific or hour-specific authorizations. There will essentially be a part-time. If you work or go to school for less than 20 hours a week, you will automatically get 20 hours. If you work or go to school for more than 20 hours, up to 40, you will automatically get 40 or a full-time allocation. So it's a much more generous and sort of robust way of looking at hours authorizations. Also, some other changes that are pretty large include student eligibility, no matter if you're working or you are not working. And so there's a big student expansion. There's also sleep time available for all families, not just single parent families. And there are some changes to the parameters of authorized medical leave and authorized work search that make staying on ERDC for families who have to take medical leave or do work search for unanticipated reasons a little bit easier. So you can stay on ERDC essentially for longer. And anticipated in July 2023, we will be making some changes to preserve true 12-month eligibility. Right now, there are some closure reasons. For instance, if you can't connect to a provider, but you were approved for ERDC, you would essentially not be able to retain your benefits. We're moving to a system where once you're approved for ERDC, you're automatically approved for 12 months. And additionally, all folks who are on TANF are going to be eligible for ERDC as well. Currently, if you're on TANF, you cannot also be on ERDC, and we are moving to a world where you can be, in fact, on both TANF and ERDC at the same time. That rounds out my
Thank you, Kayla.
Sorry, I'm over, Sue.
Sorry that you needed to be in 1.5 or double time, but thank you. And Kayla, will you send to Remy your slides so she could send those out to council?
Yes, I will resend them. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, wow. Council members, thank you for a great meeting. Lots of exciting programs going on. Peter and Peg, thank you again for chairing our home visiting system committee. We look forward to working on that a lot in 2023. And yeah, we're going to have a great new year. So in the meantime, have a wonderful holiday season coming up. I hope everyone gets to take some time off for family and friends. And we will see you all in January of 2023. So thanks, everyone. Great meeting. Bye-bye.